All right, I think we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining me here today. What's up? Is anything in the news? I picked a weird date to do this. There's so much going on today. Unfortunately, I do not have Den today, so I'm going to do my best to watch the comments as they come in and get to them between stories. And I'll go ahead and we'll get started. I guess before I do that, remember you can always support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. And if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, you can go to friendlyatheist.com. You can do that for free. You don't have to, but you can. So consider doing that. So, yeah, there was white smoke today. Let's talk about this new pope. Um, I know it's early. I know he just got chosen, Robert Prevost. He's the first American pope, a guy who actually hails from outside of Chicago, where I'm at too. It's kind of like I'm the pope in that sense. He's from the south suburbs of Chicago. He's actually, Dalton, Illinois is actually one of the textbook examples of white flight, where this pope grew up in a city that was predominantly white, and a lot of those people left when black people started moving in. I'm really curious how any of that racism affected him growing up, how it impacted him. I don't know the answer to that, but I found that interesting. I'm also very curious. You know, a lot of times, especially in the past couple of popes that we've all been conscious of, they're very different from when they enter the office to once they're in that position. They sometimes make some surprising decisions. One of the reasons Pope Francis made as many headlines as he did is I don't think people really realized when he got elected, just controversial is the wrong word, but how much of an impact he would make with some of the statements he made early in his tenure. And I don't know what the situation is going to be with Prevost. Like, I don't know necessarily what his stances are on a whole variety of things. I do want to draw your attention. I've seen so many memes. I want to show you some of the memes. But I did see a lot of people just assuming this guy is some liberal, woke, everything. Maybe because he's from America, maybe because his Twitter feed, because he has one, has condemned J.D. Vance when he was going after refugees, Haitian refugees in Ohio. And he literally wrote out the tweet calling him out on that. He has retweeted some of the things Pope Francis did and the church did, supporting refugees and migrants and people like that. So in that sense, I guess, yay, compared to the alternative. But let me just point you to a New York Times article, right? Like that came today, because what do we know about this guy when it comes to LGBTQ rights, things like that? Well, this is what he said a few years ago, 2012, address to bishops. He lamented that Western news media and popular culture fostered sympathy for beliefs and practices that are at odds with the gospel. And he specifically cited the homosexual lifestyle and alternative families composed of same-sex partners and their adopted children. So on the one hand, that's totally what you would expect a Catholic leader to say, but also that's disturbing, but also it's 2012. I mean, when Obama got elected, he was against gay marriage. You know what I mean? Like, so that stuff is disturbing. I don't know what it means now that he's not trying to suck up to anybody. He's at the top of the pyramid. You have to wonder, especially given what Pope Francis did since then, does he make any changes with regards to homosexuality, how the church treats people? What does he say about trans people? You know what I mean? The Catholic Church right now does not believe trans people are real people. They don't believe trans people exist. And we know what they think about married, same-sex marriage. We know what they think about gay people who have sex. It's all the worst kind of sins. But who knows what they do, because they have a priest shortage. And so maybe they change the rules, bend the rules a bit. Maybe at some point they allow married priests to enter the priesthood. Who knows? So you don't necessarily know what this guy's going to do. I don't think people knew about what Pope Francis was going to do until, I think, the Who Am I to Judge, that was like the first big bombshell headline. during Pope Francis's reign, that came like 6 months after he was elected Pope. So just because this guy said this in 2012, I don't know where he stands on the issues now. As my friend Callie pointed out also online, I've seen a lot of liberals jumping to defend this guy, very excited. A lot of politicians not just congratulating this guy on becoming the first American Pope, but really acting excited, like this is going to move the church in a super progressive direction. Like the Catholic Church has been a bad institution on a whole host of issues. That was true before Pope Francis entered the picture. That is still true as of like yesterday, and it's going to be true tomorrow. When it comes to civil rights, when it comes to the treatment of women, when it comes to abortion and birth control and contraception, when it comes to LGBTQ issues, the Catholic Church is arguably the biggest enemy in the world when it comes to those issues. That has not changed. And there's no reason to think this Pope is going to be any different on those issues than anyone else who could have been in his shoes right now. So the Catholic Church, still a bad organization. I quoted my friend Callie here. One of the things Callie pointed out is for an institution that doesn't think trans people even exist, what are they doing today? They're expecting you to call this guy by his chosen name and identity, one that he did not have yesterday, and no one's questioning it whatsoever. But the point is, okay, everyone thinks this guy is super liberal and super woke. The Catholic Church is not a woke institution in any sense of the word. If they're saying that, what they're thinking is, oh, this guy doesn't spend all of his free time just trashing LGBTQ people. He doesn't spend every waking hour just pushing culture war issues. It seems like his background is helping the poor and helping refugees. And he moved from the United States to Peru to work. Like, in that sense, okay, relative to other people in the Catholic Church, this guy might be slightly liberal on some issues, but by and large, the Catholic Church is not your friend. It's not a great institution. So keep that in mind. Like, don't pretend like this guy's your hero because he's going to milkshake duck real quickly. You know what I mean? I did see some fun tweets about this that I had to share. If you haven't seen these already, because we can enjoy some stuff. We can have a little bit of fun with this, right? I like, well done, social media person for Popeyes. You know, they were sitting on that one for weeks. There is also this interesting thing. The Pope went to college at Villanova and has a degree in mathematics. So he doesn't just understand sin, he understands cos. Math joke, well played, love it. Laura Loomer, the right-wing zealot, already called him woke Marxist Pope. And you could sing that to the tune of Pink Pony Club. Love it. And I saw this right away after this Pope got picked. This is from right-wing MAGA zealot dude Joshua Feuerstein. For all of those saying that the Catholic Church is the true church, why can't you guys even elect a non-woke Pope? You're telling me the representative of Christ on the earth is woke? Yeah, man, the Jesus guy you talk about was a brown-skinned Middle Eastern who helped the poor and wanted you to help refugees. So, I mean, the same people who are like, this guy's too woke, in theory, they worship someone who they would say the same things about. But part of me also thinks if guys like him are mad about this Pope, that makes him sound awesome. Steve Bannon said this would be, if they chose this guy, it would be the most progressive Pope ever. It's like, well, if Steve Bannon is upset, maybe that's a good thing. What else do we need to know about this guy? He's only 69 years old, which means he could be around for, I don't know, another 20 years. Like, this guy is going to be Pope for a while, assuming his health is there. He's served, one of the reasons he got picked is because his job was to help the Pope appoint new bishops. And in that capacity, he got to know all the players. I thought about, remember when George W. Bush was running for president in 2000, and he had to pick a vice president. Who was in charge of his vice presidential selection committee? Some dude named Dick Cheney. And they did all of this. And Dick Cheney, at the end of that whole thing, was like, you know who you should pick for VP? I'm right here. And that's what ended up happening. Well, Prevost, now Pope Leo the 14th, he was a guy who helped the Pope select the bishops, which means he knew all the players everywhere. And the fact that Pope Francis put him in that position kind of makes it seem like Pope Francis anointed him as like, I want this guy to be my successor, which even if that was subtle, that is how it played out. So that's interesting as well. One of the things that is interesting that you will see in a lot of articles is that in that group of people who helps select the next bishops, there were 3 women added to that committee. Like famously, the cardinals who choose the next pope, they're all men. You have to be a man. Spoiler if you saw Conclave, very interesting movie. But when it comes to selecting the bishops, Pope Francis allowed a few women to be part of the selection committee for that. And this is the thing this guy was in charge of. So some people are intrigued about what that could possibly mean for the future. And also, if I've seen this today, if you look back, this guy has some connection with, like, I don't know how serious this is, but covering up bad behavior by other Catholic leaders where he didn't do enough to go after them. I mean, this is going to be, I don't know enough about that to say more, but like, this is going to be one of the big issues. If you became in charge of the Catholic Church and you believe everything the Catholic Church teaches, what are you going to do to throw the hammer down when it comes to sexual abuse? I mean, what can you do at this point to make sure this is no longer a problem in your institution? Because you have now seen decades and decades of how the church handled this issue or mishandled this issue. You now have the power to do something about it. And you have to wonder, what is this guy who, born in the United States, lived in the United States, lived in Peru? He knows about these issues. He's dealt with these issues. What's he going to do about it now that he's in charge? Right? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe he's not doing enough. Maybe he will actually try to do something. But I mean, imagine waking up today, going from an unknown but high-ranking Catholic leader to probably the most famous person in the world. You have the ability to influence a lot of people on very important issues. And we're going to find out soon enough what this guy is going to do with that power that has now been handed to him. I hope he does something good. But again, I want to remind you, do not treat this guy as if he is some hero. Not yet. He hasn't done anything yet. But at the end of the day, this guy is still anti-abortion, anti-same-sex marriage, anti-trans as a people. He doesn't think you should use contraception, or Catholics should use contraception. He doesn't think birth control is okay. This is someone who is, I mean, again, there are some issues that the Catholic Church is very good on: the death penalty, the environment, science, by and large. But there are a handful of issues where the Catholic Church has held us back for a long time. And this guy's going to continue down that route, no matter what else he does on the margins. So anyway, it's early. I don't know what this means. I am amused by people trying to impute whatever beliefs they have or they want to believe about the Pope onto this one dude. So we'll find out eventually. It'll take some time, but yeah, don't get too excited by this guy. Maybe better than the alternatives, but again, being a great Catholic leader, if you are a liberal, is like rooting for a moderate Republican. There really aren't any left. And the best thing you could say about a moderate Republican is that they're not quite as insane as all the other Republicans. It doesn't mean you should ever support the person. And if there were a sane human being on the ballot, I would take the other side every time. But given the alternatives, it could be worse. It's just not great. All right, what questions do we have here before I move to another story? I'm just glancing to make sure I didn't forget anything. I'm not posting half of the things you're posting about this dude's age. All right, just checking. I'm not seeing anything big, so I'm going to move on. Um, this is interesting. Has Trump taken credit yet? He hasn't. He's issued a congratulatory tweet, or a social media team issued a basic congratulatory tweet highlighting the fact that this guy's from America. But if anything, one of the interesting things about this Pope is that by and large, you would expect the Catholic Church cardinals not to choose someone from America. Why? Because the United States is pretty damn powerful across the world. The last thing we need is also to be the home of the leader of the Catholic Church. So they've never chosen an American. They've never chosen an American Pope. And you could argue that one of the reasons they chose an American Pope is because this guy almost stands in contrast to Donald Trump. So in a way, it's possible that the reason this guy got chosen is because you want someone from America who is not Trump. And the rest of the world's like, you know what? If you're going to stand up to that guy and push back against his worst tendencies, we will support you. Also, this dude appointed a lot of bishops. He knows everybody around the world. They like him. He's good at the social game. But it's possible Donald Trump actually did have an impact on this guy getting chosen, maybe not for the reason Donald Trump believes. Okay, I'm going to jump to another story. Give me a second here to pull up some stuff. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. All right. So let's talk about what's happening in Washington State. I actually did a story on this just a few weeks ago, but this is really exciting. In Washington State recently, the governor has now signed into law a bill that makes clergy members mandatory reporters when it comes to being aware of abuse. And the way this works is if you're a public school teacher, for example, and a student who trusts you and likes you comes up to you and says, something bad is going on at my home. My father is abusing me. If you're a teacher, you cannot just sit on that information. Even if you are breaking the trust of the student, you have to go tell a social worker at the school. You have to go tell someone else in the building who can take that information and do something with it. Like the secrecy and the bond you have built with somebody else doesn't matter. You're a mandated reporter. You have to report what you know about this, because the last thing anyone wants to see happen is for that child to continue being a victim. Well, for a long time, Catholic priests were not mandated reporters. And specifically, they said, what if we're in the confessional booth and someone comes in because they're feeling really guilty and they say, Father, I have sinned. I have been doing these horrible things to a child, and I'm going to keep doing them. I know that sounds outlandish, but it has happened. And what do you do if you're a priest? Traditionally, the Catholic rule is that whatever happens in confession stays in confession. A priest cannot do anything with that information other than tell you, say these prayers and, you're forgiven or something like that. And so the question is, well, if they have knowledge that a child is getting abused, they should not be allowed to just sit on that information. And the Catholic Church, by and large, has said, hey, we didn't say that. You can totally make priests mandatory reporters, just like teachers and social workers and all of that. You can make them mandatory reporters as long as it's not in the confessional booth. If they happen to be in the church and someone talks to them, that's one thing. But if an abuser goes into the confessional booth and says this stuff, you cannot make the priest divulge that information. And that seems like a pretty convenient loophole, because what the Catholic Church is basically doing is saying, we created our own rule that allows abusers to get to feel less guilty about themselves if they confess to what they're doing, not on this side of the church, but on this side where the little box is. Then it's fine. You could say whatever horrible things you want, and we're not going to hold it against you. And in Washington state, for years, they've been trying to make priest-mandated reporters. And, for years, the compromise was that, okay, clergy can be mandated reporters, but not in the confessional booth, because the Catholic Church has rules about that. But the bill they just passed in Washington state says, we don't care if this happens in confessional. Priests are mandated reporters, period. And if they sit on information and we find out they've been sitting on information that could have protected a kid, they could go to jail or they could have to pay a fine of up to like $5,000. So that is the law that is now signed in the state of Washington. And guess who's upset about that? Catholic Church, yes, but also the Trump Department of Justice, which now says they're going to launch an investigation into the state. Unbelievable. Let me give you a little bit of background on this. So the law that was passed says priests are mandated reporters. It does not mean, however, that priests have to testify in court about anything they heard. They just have to tell law enforcement or someone in their church who can tell law enforcement any knowledge about ongoing sexual abuse. Now, the way the critics have responded to this is by saying, well, the way the law is written, we think it's unfair because, attorneys have attorney-client privilege and doctors have doctor-patient confidentiality. So if someone tells those professions that they're doing something wrong, those professions are not obligated to tell anybody. They're allowed to have some confidentiality. And we think you're picking on us because we're religious. But as articles have said over and over, that's not actually what's happening. Check this out over here. Domestic violence advocates, therapists, and unions are all groups that have privileged communications under state law, but they already lose that privilege in child abuse cases. And they still must follow mandatory reporting laws. Doctors can also be called to testify during judicial proceedings of child abuse cases. Clergy, meanwhile, still do not have to testify in court during such cases. So in some ways, this bill that has just been signed into law, while all these Catholic leaders are saying, you're treating us worse than doctors, you're treating us like they get special privilege, but we don't, it's actually the opposite. In some ways, doctors have to do stuff that priests don't have to. The other thing that doesn't make sense about this argument that, doctors and lawyers get treated differently than we do is that, what do you want? Let's say there was a law that said, guess what? No confidentiality. If anyone learns about abuse, everyone's a mandated reporter. So doctors are not exempt. Lawyers are not exempt. If that happened, do you think for a second the Catholic Church would say, oh, well, okay, if all of us are not exempt, then I guess anything we hear in confession can be told to law enforcement? Do you think they would suddenly give up on the whole confession is sacred and we can't reveal anything? No, of course they wouldn't. So this argument that we're getting treated worse than doctors is BS, because even if they were treated exactly the same, even though their jobs are very different, it's not like they would be okay with this. But this is what they are arguing against. Just to skip ahead a little bit here, because I've said a lot of this before, what the Catholic Church is now arguing is that this law requires some priests who learn about abuse, it requires them to do something that goes against their religious faith. And because confession is such a sacred thing, if you violate something that is so sacred in the Catholic faith, that's like saying, oh, a priest had sex with a woman. We're not supposed to do that. And if you do that, you don't get to be a priest anymore. You're excommunicated. Even though tons of priests do that and they have families outside the church and it's a whole thing and they never get kicked out. But the argument is, how dare this law make us do something that goes against our religious faith? Well, as one of the advocates who fought for this bill said during a hearing about it, she said it's ironic that the church will excommunicate a good priest if he reports child sexual abuse learned of in confession, even though they rarely take action against priests who are predators themselves. Like, the only people who have to worry about the privacy of their confessions in this case are people who are hurting children. We should not be making any compromises to make those people feel any better, right? It's a simple ethical question. If someone tells you they are actively abusing a child and you have the power to stop it, would you do something to stop it? I feel like any decent person would say, yeah, I'll do anything I need to do to make sure that never happens again. But Catholic priests are like, I need to think about it. I need to decide which part of the church I found that out in. And if it's this part, then I'm just going to let the kid keep getting hurt because we're the Catholic Church. We're very ethical. Thankfully, Democrats in the state of Washington have better ethics than the Catholic Church because they say, no, it's never okay to sit on that secret, so we're going to make you report it. One of the bishops of the Archdiocese of Seattle, Frank Schuster, he said during the hearings it would be impossible for a priest to comply with this bill because the penalty for breaking that seal of confession is excommunication. That's the biggest thing priests have to worry about, getting excommunicated. Now, what's the biggest thing a victim of child abuse has to worry about? It's the child abuse. But the priests are very upset they'll lose their costume. In no rational world is getting excommunicated a worse thing than letting a child continue to suffer sexual abuse. What is wrong with you? And if you would rather protect priests than kids, then your organization should at least admit we don't give a shit about the safety of children. That same bishop, by the way, he said, you guys, don't worry, I have a compromise. If a priest is hearing about abuse in confession, they can just tell the offenders to turn themselves in. And it's that doesn't make anything better. That's not what happens. If I tell Pete Hegseth to stop drinking on the job, he's not just going to do it. You have to force their hand. Otherwise, they're never going to do it. By the way, one of the questions the last time I talked about this, before this bill was signed, is I wonder if the governor's going to walk this one back. Because it turns out Bob Ferguson, the governor of Washington, is Catholic. And maybe he feels bad about this. But guess what he said when he was asked if the confession rule gave him any pause? This is what he said. Keeping the confessional in the bill did not give Ferguson pause. Not for me, he said. As a Catholic, I'm very familiar with it. Been to confession myself. I felt this was important legislation for protecting kids. Yeah, this governor is I would rather protect kids than protect confession, which is the right answer to every ethical dilemma ever, right? So that's fantastic. Who else is mad about this? This is a statement that was put out by the Archdiocese of Seattle. There we go. And they have a very lengthy response to this bill. But I'm going to bring you to this part right over here, starting with while we remain committed to protecting minors. Stop right there. You're the Catholic Church. That is not what your commitment is. While we remain committed to protecting minors and all vulnerable people from abuse, does that include trans people that you say don't exist and gay people in marriages who you think should not be allowed to adopt from Catholic adoption agencies? But again, while we remain committed to all those people, priests cannot comply with this law if the knowledge of abuse is obtained during the sacrament of reconciliation. They have to call it that because if they said, we can't comply with this law if we learn about abuse through the box that is over there, it sounds like you're insane. But when you make it sound like something out of Game of Thrones, you have to, take it seriously then. This is another thing. What else did they say here? With this law, the state of Washington is specifically targeting religious conduct by inserting the government into the Catholic tradition, namely the highly defined ritual of the sacrament of reconciliation. Again, if they just said, you guys, we have a box and we said it's a secret box, why are you making us violate the law of the sacred box? If they put it that way, you would say, the hell are you talking about? But because they make it sound mystical, they think everyone else should give them respect that they have not earned. Also, look, if you're saying the government is inserting itself into the Catholic tradition, and it's unfair for the government to stick itself in what the church's business is, well, then the church shouldn't be exempt from the government's laws either, because that's a special privilege for the church that it should not have. And then look at this. The law also attempts to supersede the code of canon law, which is them saying, how dare you make us follow your rules because we have rules too. And they say abuse victims can suck it. Like, who cares what canon law says? I am not bound by canon law. You're not bound by canon law. The state of Washington is not bound by canon law. Who cares what canon law is? And think about this. What is the Catholic Church doing here? They are saying, here's why we don't care enough about children to protect them. Look at our rules. No one cares what your rules are. It's absurd. It's just a dumb argument to make in defense of sex predators that you want to defend, right? Totally absurd. There is a time when it makes sense to push back against what you feel are unjust laws, right? If there is segregation under the law, then civil rights marches are an act of good trouble, as John Lewis famously said. These priests think they are going to be martyrs by not following this law. But you are not a martyr, and you are not causing good trouble if you are sacrificing children to preserve your made-up shit. Like, this is all of this. Everything you were hearing from the Catholic Church is a way of rationalizing something unethical. Because common sense would tell you protecting children from abuse is more important than keeping an abuser's secret. Just absurd that the Catholic Church is making this argument. Like, I don't know, if the state fines me for driving above the speed limit, that violates my personal freedom to drive as fast as I want, but the state has an obligation to protect everyone in the community. And here the Catholic Church is insisting their religious beliefs, which should not matter outside of their personal, bubbles, it should override the communal need to protect children. I don't get it. Doesn't make any sense. But here's another thing. Now the Trump administration is getting involved with this. This is what the Department of Justice shared this week. The Justice Department announces First Amendment investigation into Washington State's new anti-Catholic law. They're calling it an anti-Catholic law. It is not. It is a law that protects children from child sex predators, and the Catholic Church wants to help the predators, and the Trump Department of Justice is calling this law anti-Catholic. It's not anti-Catholic unless you think Catholicism and, sex predators are on the same side. That is their implication, which is a weird thing to say. But this is what they pointed out after making an argument about religion. The Civil Rights Division, which who knew that still existed, the Civil Rights Division will investigate the apparent conflict between Washington State's new law with the free exercise of religion under the First Amendment, a cornerstone of the U.S. Constitution, which is surprising to me because I didn't know they gave a shit about the Constitution. But notice that they don't talk about kids here. They do not care about the children. They do not care about abuse victims. They are saying there's a conflict between their law and what we want to do, or what the Catholic Church wants to do, which again, I need to stress, is protecting predators. They don't want to say that, so they couch it in religious language. This bill demands that Catholic priests, let's read this until we get to the part where they say it has good intentions, it's trying to protect kids. It demands that Catholic priests violate their deeply held faith in order to obey the law. A violation of the Constitution and a breach of the free exercise of religion cannot stand under our constitutional system of government, said Harmeet Dillon, who, man, look at that Wikipedia page. She's not a good person. Worse, the law appears to single out clergy as not entitled to assert applicable privileges as compared to other reporting professionals. That is ChatGPT right there, because no humans talk that way. But again, I just want to point out, all they are saying here is, how dare you violate Catholic beliefs, but the beliefs they are trying to protect is we got to make sure sex predators are protected. That's what the Catholic Church wants. Washington State Democrats said, no, we want to protect children. And all these people, these Republicans, are like, we got to make sure the Catholic Church can make a safe space for child sex predators. I don't know. Am I the only one seeing this? Again, clergy members are not singled out. They are mentioned in this bill specifically because they were exempt in the past, and now they are not. And like I said, other professionals are not bound by confidentiality when it comes to ongoing child abuse. It's weird that that's not even mentioned in any of this. A local newspaper asked Noelle Frame, who's the Democrat who sponsored this legislation, if she was surprised that the Trump administration is doing this investigation. This is what she said. I shouldn't be surprised that the Trump administration is launching an investigation into a law that seeks to protect children from child abuse and neglect. Right, because of course the Trump administration is going to protect the predators. No one should be surprised by that at all. Like, it would be far more compelling if the Catholic Church or the Trump administration, maybe you could make this argument if those institutions had a history of protecting children and protecting abuse victims, but neither one does. Like, the Catholic Church famously does not protect victims of abuse. And Republicans, they're actively spreading deadly viruses that hurt children while denying vaccine safety. And they voted for a guy who is a sex predator. So I don't know. They don't care about any of this stuff. The one silver lining to all this is that I really do believe the Trump administration gets more satisfaction out of putting out these press releases than actually doing anything. So right now, the Trump administration has not filed a lawsuit against the state of Washington. They haven't done anything to go after the law. I don't know if they will, because I think what they really want is to put out a press release like this where they make it sound like they're on the side of religious freedom, get the headlines that end up getting generated as a result of this, pat themselves on the back, and then ignore this because they don't give a shit about civil rights. They don't give a shit about religious freedom. So I don't know that they're actually going to do anything, or even if they try to file a lawsuit, maybe it doesn't stand up in court. But right now, they haven't done anything. Right now, it's all talk. The Freedom from Religion Foundation did issue a statement about this, defending the law, obviously, but this is what they said about it. The government has a compelling interest in protecting children from abuse. This is from Patrick Elliott. The law does not target Christianity or Catholicism. It applies equally to all clergy. Religious freedom does not include the right to conceal abuse. And the DOJ's position undermines both child safety and the Constitution it purports to defend. Look at the last line in the next paragraph. It is not anti-Christian to hold clergy accountable. It is pro-child, pro-justice, and pro-human rights. Couldn't be said any better than that. So I am so proud of Noelle Frame, who sponsored this legislation and got it done. This is the third time she's tried to pass this bill, and she got it done. And if you live in Washington, be sure to thank your Democratic representatives who voted for this bill. I'm thinking of Christiana de Leon, who might be watching this, who's a strong advocate and who spoke at some of those committee hearings in favor of this bill, and all the groups that worked to get this passed, despite knowing the Catholic Church was going to be mad about it, that the Trump administration would be mad about it, and especially thanks to the governor, Bob Ferguson, who signed this bill despite being a Catholic, knowing that it's in the best interest of children. So, there's not a lot of great political news these days, but this is a win-win situation for everyone, except for all the people that want to protect sex predators. So I'm going to leave it there. What other questions we got here? I appreciate this donation. Thank you. When you govern for God, people come second. Very true. Unfortunately, shouldn't be that way, but it sure feels like it is. What other questions? Am I missing anything? I hope I'm not missing anything. Give me just a second while I look through these. All right. I hope I didn't miss anything. I'm going to jump to the next story just because I got so many things to talk about. All right. Oh, you're going to love this one. I'm so excited to share this with you. Hey, while I got you here, for the 4 of you who are watching, this is a really neat honor I just want to share with you. This is the American Humanist Association. They're having their conference at the end of June in Chicago, and they have just put this out there recently. They have their awardees every year who gets their awards, and Lifetime Achievement Award to Fred Edwards, good guy. I love him. I just saw this for the first time. I didn't know this. Megan Hunt, a state senator from Nebraska, is getting their Religious Liberty Award. She's one of the handful of lawmakers who, every time she speaks, I am so grateful that there can be smart, intelligent people in government who care for the right things. But check this out. Humanist Media Award they are giving to me. Seriously grateful for that honor. I hope I get to make some sort of speech or something, but that is such a cool thing. And so if you are in Chicago or you are coming to the AHA convention, you can register for that now. That's in Chicago at the end of the month. I'm very excited about that. Just wanted to share that. Let me jump ahead to this story that I wanted to share with you. Okay. Here's the story. Get ready for this. There's a public school board in North Carolina that I think is about to get sued because they really want to include Christian prayers in their meetings. Now, the reason I want to tell you the story is because one of their board members knows this is a horrible idea, and she did her best to make sure the rest of the board did not make a serious mistake. So this is taking place in the Cabarrus County School Board. And a couple of weeks ago, they were discussing adding a prayer to their meetings. One of their board members, Melanie Freeman, she made the argument that, hey, prayer is everywhere. God is everywhere. We have in God we trust as our motto. And you have that on the money, right? And you say we're one nation under God in the pledge. And therefore, we should say a prayer to God at the beginning of our meetings. Let me play for you what she said, then we'll talk about it afterwards.
From the very beginning, when the Puritans touched ground in the New World, prayer has been the bedrock of this nation. The First Continental Congress relied heavily on prayer to move forward in their deliberations and bring unity in writing our Constitution. Today, our U.S. Congress begins each opening day with an invocation before reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Many state governments as well as municipalities also begin their meetings with an invocation. We have a National Day of Prayer. We have In God We Trust on our money, and we pledge allegiance to one nation under God. The Supreme Court has ruled on 2 separate occasions that an invocation does not violate the Establishment Clause in our Constitution, and having an invocation is a time-honored tradition of our country. For these reasons and more, I respectfully make a motion to include an invocation to our agenda and meetings moving forward. I also ask this to be forwarded to the Policy Committee to write guidelines that may be voted on by this board.
Okay, so where do you even begin with that much ignorance, right? She doesn't seem to know that a lot of those traditional mentions of God in the pledge as the motto, all that, that's not like some tradition that existed at our nation's founding. That is stuff that was added because of targeted efforts by Christians in the 1950s. And this is also why you never allow Christians to put like the 10 Commandments in schools today, because even if it's symbolic, they use those symbols to justify doing this sort of stuff later on, and they'll just say it's tradition, right? But besides that, here's the bigger issue. She said Congress opens the day with an invocation, and the Supreme Court has ruled in defense of invocations. However, what she doesn't pick up on, and what maybe she just doesn't know it because she doesn't do the research clearly, is that city councils and state governments are substantively different from school boards, all right, where children may be present. That's kind of the big difference. This is from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which, focuses on this for a long time. They have a whole section about school board prayers on their website. And I want to zone in on what they say here. Over 60 years of Supreme Court decisions have affirmed that religious ritual and indoctrination are inappropriate and illegal in public schools, including at graduations and other school-sponsored events. They have said you can have invocations at city council meetings and all that stuff. But at the very end here, a school board meeting is a school-sponsored event, and it is subject to Establishment Clause precedent involving public schools. To put it another way, you have kids that show up at school board meetings. So you cannot use a board meeting as a way to indoctrinate other people. Doesn't matter if a majority of the board says it's cool. City councils, even though I wish this weren't the case, city councils, you're expecting it to be adults. Institutions of, legislatures, Congress, these are adults. So I wish they didn't have this symbolic prayer at the beginning of meetings, but there's a difference. No kids involved, right? So what she is asking for isn't just ethically wrong. It's not just exclusionary. It's illegal. There is no legal precedent to have Christian invocations or any invocations at school board meetings. And here's the thing. There was one member of that board that knew all of that. Her name is Pam Escobar. And after that other woman, Melanie Freeman, ended that ignorant spiel, Escobar chimed in by trying to explain. She said, I'm not, like, here's me trying to put myself in her shoes. She wasn't going to try to make a legal argument against it. She just tried to make a passionate argument for why this is a bad idea. And the argument she is making is this is a very diverse community, and trying to shove prayer into a school board meeting would exclude so many people in their community. Why would you want to do that? I'm going to play you this speech. It is a long speech that she is making, but I wouldn't be playing this for you if I didn't think this was worth it. Again, she's not just a voice of reason here. She is a voice of sensibility, and she is speaking for everyone in the crowd who doesn't have her platform. Okay? Let me play this for you. It's a long clip. It is worth your time to hear.
You saw this meeting tonight. It was beautiful, right? The first hour, this room was filled with parents and students and teachers and staff who are award-winning, exceptional people. And if you looked at our audience, they don't look like us. They look like this community. We are diverse. We come from 92 countries. We speak 67 languages. We represent the United States. We also represent Cabarrus County. And if you put prayer at the beginning of this meeting, I don't think that's a welcoming sign to the people who are in this room tonight. There are people in this room that don't practice the faith that the people on this board practice. And, we had an award-winning teacher tonight, right? She's only been teaching for 2 years. And in her kindergarten class, she welcomes everyone into her classroom, right? They talked about how every child belongs. Every child belongs. And I would not want to do anything that says to this community, you don't belong in our school district, you don't belong in our public school system. And so this, to me, is very disturbing because I think it sends the wrong message that we're trying to communicate. And frankly, we are not in the business of faith or religion. That's not what we do. We teach, we empower, we inspire. And so to do something that would be the opposite of that is disheartening. And then on top of it, this board prays. This board prays before every meeting if you choose to be a part of it. You have an invocation that is outside, and it's led by a lobbyist with Capital Ministries who is, I don't know, he's been here as long as I've been on the board. And how much prayer do you need? How much God do you need? We say under God, we say it. Why do we need to say more? And I will tell you just personally, as a board member, I do not feel welcome to be part of that prayer. And I'm Christian. And I don't feel welcome to go outside and pray with you. So if I'm one of 7 people who are sitting up here who's telling you this is exclusionary, how can we be a part of the school system and then do that to our entire school district? If you're going to bring this policy forward, I would seriously want us to take a look at, are we violating policy if more than 4 people are praying before our meeting? And it's happening every week. I think today was the first time it wasn't 5 of you. But it was still 4. Still 4. And policy says, if you're going to do that, then you need to be transparent about that. I don't know what Mr. Marshall is praying about. Is he telling you how to vote? Is he telling you what to believe? Capital Ministries, for those who are not aware, is a lobbyist, a conservative lobbyist. He used to send us all emails. I requested to be off the list because I was offended by some of the things that he was saying. So I don't know if that's the direction he's giving you before all of our meetings. Is he telling you not to trust me? I mean, I don't know. But the fact that the 5 of you are doing that, I hope that's enough prayer for you. Everyone who's sitting here still now are professionals. They come to work to dedicate their lives to children. They didn't come here to pray with you. If you want to pray with them, take them to church. You want to be evangelical and do that, go for it. But not on my time, not on their time, and not in this community's time. We're not in this business. This is not the time or the place. We're better than that.
I don't know, man. That was amazing. I rarely see school board member speeches that are that good for that long and making compelling arguments throughout. One of the things she mentioned is that her colleagues, there are 7 people on this school board, and she said 4, maybe 5 of them take part in a prayer circle before meetings begin, and it's run by a group called Capital Ministries. If you are not familiar with Capital Ministries, and she mentioned it a little bit, they're most famous because this guy, their leader, Ralph Drollinger, actually, he's the head of this thing. He does Bible studies for members of Congress where he says things like people who disagree with the conservative agenda are under the control of Satan. That's what this dude tells members of Congress. And what Miss Escobar was saying to this board is it's one of his guys that leads you in prayer before the meetings. What is he telling you to do? Is he telling you to vote certain ways? Is he telling you not to listen to me? I don't know. But like, that is what these people do in Congress. So that's disturbing. I love that she pointed out, like, how much prayer do you need? How much God do you need? At some point, you have to wonder, like, is there some threshold that these religious people feel like they need to hit before God is paying any attention to them? And she also mentioned she's a Christian herself, and yet even she doesn't feel welcome in their prayer circles because they're friggin' weird about it. So her colleagues did not get this. After that clip, one of them pointed out that, hey, other local governments have invocation prayers, which is true, but also, again, I repeat, these are different because children are not involved at city council meetings, at state government meetings, or anything like that. So now, after hearing her colleagues say idiotic things and clearly missing her point about respecting the diversity of their school district by not injecting their prayer into the mix, she tried again. And this time she told them, you guys, if we go through with this prayer, we are going to be sued. And one of the things she brings up, and I'll play this clip for you in a second, is that in another county in North Carolina, Rowan County, a few years ago, they had a whole thing where their county leaders were leading Christian prayers at every meeting. Not only did they have invocation prayers, but they were all Christian, and they were being said by the members of the county commission themselves. And they got sued over that, and they eventually lost that case. They had to settle the case. And guess what? In 2019, they settled that case, and the county had to pay $285,000 in attorney fees to the ACLU. They settled the case. They don't have to say they lost, but yeah, they lost. And so what Escobar wants to point out in the clip I'm about to show you is she says, if we go through with this, our situation is going to be even worse than Rowan County because they were adults. And so we will get sued and it could be very costly, right? So if you have prayer at meetings, you have to be prepared for people who are going to sue over it. Let me play this clip for you. It's a little shorter, but it's worth it.
And guess what? If you do this, we're going to have legal challenges. So we're sitting here tonight talking about how much litigation we have and things that are in our control and out of our control, right? We can't control who sues us. But if you do this, it takes one person. And guess what? It goes all the way to the Supreme Court because it's in the Constitution. And Rowan County, the Rowan County commissioners dealt with this for 10 years ago. And it went all the way up. And I sent an article today to the chair, and I hope he shares it with all of you. The costs associated with doing something like this. So there are things you can control and things that you can't. You want to pray? You can control that you pray before this meeting. I don't need to participate in that, and I don't think you need to say that, make the entire school district join you in your prayer. And if you do, then you have to be prepared for people to sue us because they have the right to religious freedom. You want to talk about what's being an American, about being patriotic? That's American.
Love it. By the way, I want to share this comment with you. Heaven, I was going to turn the sound down during your speech. I'm glad you convinced me to listen. Gold. Yeah. No, listen, I haven't even shown you the best clips yet. But, and yes, this is Cabarrus County. Let me show this to you here. Is this Cabarrus County? They're a little different out there. My brother-in-law is considered a dirty commie out there. Kind of goes with it, which is pretty funny. So she made that speech. And what happened after she said all that? Like, we're going to get sued, you guys. Melanie Freeman, the lady who made this request, she chimed in saying, come on, I'm not trying to force Christianity on everybody. I'm just trying to force prayer on everybody. And she pointed out, like, the details of how they did that. Like, a policy committee could figure out the details. But again, that infuriated Escobar even more because guess what? If you have any kind of policy, by the way, I'll just cut to the chase here. There's no policy that makes this work because again, invocations at school board meetings are illegal. But then she tried a different approach. Escobar's like, if you make the policy committee craft a policy about this and our lawyers have to deal with the policy on this, it only creates more work and more chaos for all those people. Because think about what has to happen. Even if you theoretically had a policy for this, you have to figure out how are we going to select the speakers? What are the rules for invocations? What happens if a speaker doesn't follow the rules? What happens if a Satanist wants to speak or an atheist wants to speak? What happens if only Christians ever want to speak? How are we going to make sure the district is truly open to people of all faiths and no religious faith? Right? It is not as simple as just saying, we'll have an invocation policy and be done with it. It gets so complicated. And you all know this because I've talked plenty about invocations where you have an atheist speaking or you have a Satanist speaking, and it causes all sorts of madness because no one's expecting that still for some reason. So what happens when that becomes like, oh, the school board meeting got derailed after someone used the first 5 minutes to pray to Satan? That's what they're opening themselves up to. And this lady is trying to warn her colleagues. How is this good for anybody?
There's work associated with that too. So if you pass a policy that a different person can come through, who's going to vet that person? Who's going to make sure what they're saying is appropriate? How are we going to do this? Oh, and then guess what? If this person submits something and we prohibit them from saying what they submitted, then we get into whole free speech things. You are creating the amount of work associated with it, either with our staff or with our lawyers. This is not a simple, let's just say a prayer. It's very complicated, both in the preparation and then the execution. And again, We spent an hour celebrating our students and our faculty and our staff today. Why do I want to spend a second making things tricky or difficult for the lawyers who work for our school system or the staff? Okay. What is the benefit of that workload when you can pray, and you do right now? Let's be clear. What this thing is saying, what Cleveland County does is they pray, and it's outside. It's not during the meeting. So how is this good for kids? How is this good for our school district? How is this being a good steward of taxpayer dollars?
Okay.
It's not.
Okay.
She's trying so hard. Her colleagues are idiots, and she knows it. And she's like, come on, I'm trying to speak sense to you, and none of you seem to get it. And after all this, the board's attorney chimes in and says, well, there might be a way to craft a policy that minimizes legal problems, not makes them disappear, but like minimizes them. To which I, a non-lawyer, say, no, there isn't, because you're going to get sued if you have any kind of policy because no invocations at school board meetings, so whatever. But after the attorney chimes in, she tried one last time to speak sense to her colleagues, and this time you're going to listen to her tone, and you could tell she is exhausted, which you have to be after banging your head against the wall as long as this lady has. But honestly, if you're watching this on YouTube, you should rewind like 15, 20 minutes, watch that first video of hers, and then watch this fourth one and listen to the change in tone. Because now she's just appealing to their sense of duty. Like, you are school board members. You took an oath to help the students. Why do you need even more help, in theory, to do your job? Because y'all already promised you would do this job. So what's the point of the prayer? She's mixing logic in there. She's like, you already have an obligation to the school district. Why do you need to inject religion into this? This is her just, she's so sick of this at this point. Here's the last one.
I don't know why you need prayer to take this job seriously. Everyone up here took an oath. Every meeting that we've had since you've been here has been taken seriously. I have not participated, like I said, in your prayer, and I don't think anyone would doubt my commitment to the students of this district. So why you need this to take it seriously when you took an oath is questionable. So again, I've made it perfectly clear where I stand, but don't say this is going to unify when I'm telling you it will not. Because I'm one person, and no, I am not 7 people. And yes, you only need 4. But if I tell you I'm offended, I'm offended. That is not going to unify us. And if in practice, where you tell somebody you don't have to participate and don't worry, you won't be dinged or whatever, like, how do you do that? How do you do that? Are you going to say to everybody in the room who's like packed in here like sardines because they want to take a picture of their kid, oh, hold on a second, we're going to do this thing that's going to make you super uncomfortable right now, so you're going to leave the room? No, they're not going to leave the room because they want to save their seat. There's a practicality to the reality of the situation that you're ignoring. But also the fact that you're ignoring the words that I'm saying and making that you're saying that's your argument, that we won't be solemn enough, we won't take this seriously. What have you been doing for the last 6 months? Huh? Why do you need this? How does this benefit kids? And I have not heard a decent answer.
Amazing. I mean, that's a masterclass in how to challenge invocations. She was calm. She was full of righteous anger, armed with the facts. Unfortunately, she's also surrounded by Christian zealots who want to turn school board meetings into extensions of their church. I mean, again, if they go through with invocations, we know how this is going to go. Besides the lawsuit, right? Satanists are going to want to speak. Atheists are going to want to speak. A local pastor is going to want to speak, and he's going to say all the gay students in the district are going to hell. What happens when someone invokes the name of a God the majority of people don't believe in? What happens when a minority faith or a non-traditional faith wants to give an invocation, but they are told there's no room in the schedule for them? And why is this the issue that this school board wants to die on? Like, why is this so damn important compared to everything else school board members actually have to do? And here is someone clearly knows what she's talking about, banging her head against the wall, explaining you all should care about the students instead of yourselves. And not a single person seriously came to her defense. So after all of this board voted 5-2 to allow the drafting of a prayer policy. They're moving it to the next step. Like their policy committee, I don't know who's on it. I hope that there's a lawyer in it, but they're going to put together a draft of what a policy could look like, which the board can then vote on. And I assume there will be public comment at that time and people will chime in. And I hope, since Ms. Escobar wasn't able to talk sense to them, maybe all these other voices will be able to eventually. But, if you were a smarter school board as a whole, you would not waste your time doing any of this because it's a waste of time for everybody. But this is what happens with Christian nationalism. These people are hell-bent on injecting their religion everywhere where it doesn't belong. Even when they're elected to secular government positions where they actually have a job to do, they still want to treat it like their personal church. And by the way, Pamela Escobar, the lady who was speaking there, she has background as a print journalist and a TV reporter, which I think helps explain why, even as a non-lawyer, she's able to understand what is going on here and present it in such a compelling way. And she's very articulate, given that what she's actually saying is all the rest of you are out of your effing minds. So I guess the hope at this point is that the policy committee looks into the matter and then comes back to the board and says, yeah, there's no policy that's going to work because the cost of litigation and the risk of litigation is going to be too high. And there is no sensible invocation policy you can have, not at any government meeting, but especially not at a school board meeting. But if they decide to shoot themselves in the foot and move forward with invocations, I hope at least Ms. Escobar can sleep soundly knowing she was right and she told them so, and she had the best interests of the district at heart, as opposed to all of those other people who apparently would rather waste thousands of taxpayer dollars paying legal bills than helping the kids in that district. So right now, there's no timeline for when this policy committee is going to meet or be done with their job or anything like that, but I will keep you updated. Any other questions while we are going through this? I hope I didn't miss anything. I know there's a lot going on here. Stop trying to flirt with the people in the videos. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on to the next story. This is another one where you're going to enjoy watching the video for this next one. Okay. Give me 1 second here to pull up some stuff. So this may be different. I got a story for you where the church is the good guys and the church people are the good guys. Doesn't happen very often. We'll savor it while we can. Okay. So there is a church in New Jersey that wants to build a homeless shelter on its property. And they are dealing with all kinds of chaos because of it. I don't want to give everything away, but let me start with this. We're talking about Christ Episcopal Church in Toms River, New Jersey. So this church, it's an Episcopal church. Like I said, it has about 150 people that come every week. And the location of the church, they actually have a lot of space. And on their land, they have a couple of buildings. One's the church, one's another office building of sorts. And they kind of let nonprofit groups use that office building. And one of the nonprofits that works out of their church then is called the Affordable Housing Alliance. And you could guess what they do, right? They're trying to make sure there's affordable housing for people who can't afford it. And last year, the church said, we care about this issue. We want to make sure homelessness is addressed. And what can we do as a church to address that problem? So they wanted to build a 17-bed shelter on their property. Like, they would do everything by the book. The problem is, because of where their church is located, it's a residential area. You can't just build a building on there, much less a shelter, without getting approval from the town's zoning board. And you got to get an exemption to their rules that say you can't build certain things on there. And this is what the lawyers The church lawyer went to the zoning board and tried to make an argument for why you ought to let the church build this shelter. This is a guy, what's his name? His name is York. What's his name? Harvey York. This is what the lawyer said. It's a good use for the property. We have funding and we would renovate the existing building to accommodate it. He said Ocean County has no permanent shelter for the homeless, right? People who are advocates for those experiencing homelessness argue a shelter could help people get back on their feet, connect them to mental health counseling and job training and assistance in getting insurance and identification. The answer really is the church is the right place. There's already counseling there. We are not putting 200 people here. It's 17 beds. Like, yeah, okay, that's a fair point to me. Not only is this an extension of the work the church already does, they are providing a space that the government, the local government, is not already providing. Like, there is a different shelter in the region, but it only offers overnight lodging when it's freezing cold. And that one is on the verge of shutting down. And there's another shelter, but it's only open to families. So individuals cannot take advantage of it. And on top of that, in Toms River, local housing costs have skyrocketed, and alternatives like cheap motels and stuff like that, those are disappearing. So, like, you can make an argument that this shelter really is needed. So that's important. So they need the city's permission to move forward with it by getting an exemption to the rules. So what they need, what the church needs right now is something called a use variance permit. Like, we're changing up how we're using this land. So can you give us permission to do it that way? And one of the criteria for getting a use variance permit is you got to prove you are offering something inherently beneficial to the community. Well, I would think a homeless shelter fits that criteria, right? Seems to make sense. One lady, however, who went to a zoning board meeting said, this is not beneficial for anybody. Check this out. I don't care if you're going to call me a NIMBY, not in my backyard. I don't care if you're going to call me a racist. I am not. I am a taxpayer. And I just don't think it's fair, because she lives near the church. Her voice cracked, and she seemed near tears as she recounted her fears that the 17-bed shelter would act as a magnet to draw even more unhoused people to the sites. Her remarks drew loud applause from the crowd. So this lady is worried that if you build a shelter, what, other people who are homeless might come there? Okay. But she also complained separately that she had seen people without homes who were sleeping on benches in her area. And she said she saw some of them smoking. And she worried that if you allow these people in the shelter, they might burn that building down, and that fire is going to set her house on fire. And she said, and I quote, "My house is wood." But again, if you don't like homeless people sleeping on the bench near your community, you know what would stop that from happening? A shelter. So then there's another guy who opposes the shelter. His name is Edward Bezdecki. He's one of the lawyers opposing the shelter. And he says there's nothing beneficial, inherently beneficial about this shelter, because everyone in the community is going to suffer because our property values will go down. And also our lives will be worse if you give shelter to these unhoused people. This is what he said. Where is it a benefit? They, meaning the homeowners, they are not gaining anything. These homes, forget about the value. I'm talking about quality of life. Presently, when you look at the people that are coming to this location, they are coming by in their 20s. Oh no, not 20-year-olds. They're wearing black with hoods. Oh no. And masks and backpacks. They're coming in droves. Right, because you really got to worry about those 20-year-olds with backpacks. Listen, if you gave people a shelter, they would not have to carry all their shit with them all the time, so they probably wouldn't need the backpacks. I don't know. Again, having a shelter keeps them off the benches too. If you don't like the sight of homeless people in your community, a shelter is a way to solve the problem, not exacerbate the problem. And the church is offering to host the shelter and build it, renovate it, and manage it. And by the way, even if that lawyer was not talking about property values, other people were talking about them. And one guy argued that if you allow the church to welcome, if you give the church an exemption, a zoning exemption to build this shelter, what's the slippery slope after that? Like, what are other churches going to do? Are other churches going to want to help people then too? And we can't have that, can we? Look at this. Toms River resident Paul Williams argued that allowing a variance at the Christ Episcopal Church site could allow other religious institutions to seek their own variances. I am adamantly opposed to this application because I see bigger than just this one issue. I see bigger than this application. I am concerned that this is going to open a floodgate that can't be closed. And by floodgate in this case, he means, oh no, what if other churches want to help other people who are down on their luck? That would be the worst thing ever. We can't have that, can we? Like, nothing worse than a community helping too many people who are really having it rough. Am I right? So anyway, where are we at with this? Right now, a use variance approval, the vote on whether they're going to approve this variance, is scheduled 2 weeks from now on May 22nd, as I'm making this video. But that's only part one of this story. Because again, they are debating that, and a lot of people in the community do not want the church to build this shelter. They do not want the city to give them this use variance permit. But as all this is being debated, it turns out the mayor of Toms River really hates homeless people. How do I know that? Well, he has accused Ocean County of, quote, dumping homeless people in his town to exaggerate the housing crisis. Here's another thing. Look at this headline here. Let me just show you the headline. Rock Legends restaurant feeds those in need. New Jersey mayor wants it closed down. It turns out John Bon Jovi has a nonprofit called JBJ Soul Kitchen, where they provide meals to the hungry for free. And the county gave that nonprofit the ability to open up inside of a branch of a local library. So they are feeding the hungry outside of a local library. And the mayor of Toms River said it's attracting too many homeless people and leading to disorderly behavior. So that is what the mayor is doing right now. Now, it turns out, it seems to me, that the mayor of Toms River has sway over the city council, because it seems like the city council is very worried this shelter is going to get the approval it needs, and they do not want that to happen. So guess what they just did last week? Before a meeting of the city council, they included in their agenda this item. It was the last thing on the agenda. They want to pass an ordinance, and check this out. Ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Toms River, Ocean County, New Jersey. This sounds like a bunch of nonsense, but what they are saying is we are going to use eminent domain to just take over parts of the city. And which parts do we want to take over? They want to take over a handful of marinas that they say are not being used properly. And look at the part that's highlighted. We want to acquire the property known as 415 Washington Street, block 687, lot 16. And if you look on a map, this is what that lot looks like. Let me blow this up for you a little bit. This is what Washington Street looks like. That's the part the city now wants to take over. And if I put Google Maps on top of this, it's not the right shape, but it's the same area. Guess what happens to be in that lot? You guessed it, Christ Episcopal Church and the Affordable Housing Alliance. Think about what is going on here. The city is now threatening to take over this land that houses the church and the nonprofit building where they would be building this shelter. The city wants to just take it over. And they're not saying it's because of the shelter. They're just, they just want to take over some stuff through eminent domain. And what do they want to do with this land after they take it over? Well, they say we have big plans for this land. This isn't about stopping the homeless shelter. We actually want to build something on it. And they actually shared a picture of what they want to build. Like, Check this out. You could see a big soccer field right where the church is. If I remove my face from this, can I do that? There we go. There are the pickleball courts in blue. Gotta have the pickleball courts. And you also see a parking lot. By the way, on the far left over there, on the far left, you see a skate park. Because if you don't like homeless people in your neighborhood and in your community, you know what you're going to love? A bunch of teenage skaters. If I've learned anything from movies from the 1980s, it's that old people love young skaters. There's also in the upper left, maybe that's the skate park. Either way, there is a skate park in here. But this is what they say they want to build. And the reason they want to build it, they say, is because there are no parks in the community. We need a good downtown park. And it just so happens that's the best space to put it because gotta have our pickleball courts. This is the argument that the church, that the city is making. This is from a local news outlet. The church property would allow a park to be developed closer to the downtown section, as well as the surrounding residential neighborhood, which does not have an easily accessible park of its own. The property, measuring dozens of acres, could also be used for the construction of pickleball courts, tennis courts, a skate park, and a playground. There's no playground for the kids anywhere downtown for the most part. But specifically, this would serve about 20,000 families who live between this place and that diamond that runs up to Route 37, says the mayor of the town. There's nothing there servicing those kids. And this park, this would provide 20 to 30,000 people with a place to play. It would be bigger than the other park that they don't use anymore. So again, think about how devious this is. After the church says we want to build a homeless shelter, and a bunch of local community members are like, don't build a homeless shelter here. It's going to draw in people we don't like. The city's like, oh, by the way, we want to build a giant park for 20,000 people and a bunch of teen skateboarders because the community members are going to love that. You don't like one homeless person sleeping on the bench, but rowdy teenagers you'd be totally cool with? Okay. But this is the city's argument. In theory, let's say the city uses eminent domain and tries to take over this land. There is a legal way for them to do that. You have to explain why you want to take it over, and a court needs to agree that's a legitimate reason. You also need to pay for all the stuff that is currently on that land, and the church is worth an estimated $2.5 million. Now, where this could go south is this really the only spot in downtown Toms River where you could build a park? Is this really necessary? Is there nowhere else in the city where you could do anything like this? I don't know. Now, it would be easier for them to take over this land if the church was not in use, but it totally is. As I said, they have 150 people every week. They also, according to Episcopal Church Service, it is a hub for community outreach. They host more than 20 support groups. They run a food pantry, and they do a weekly clothing distribution effort. So this church would be basically shut down if the city wanted to take it over. And if it shut down, it can't do the homeless shelter, right? It seems pretty obvious that they're only doing this. They're only saying we're going to take this over and build a park to block the church from building the homeless shelter. I am the one connecting those dots. The city is very much not connecting those dots because they're like, no, this has nothing to do with that. But, if you did not want the zoning committee to have to reject the approval for a shelter, it's a whole lot easier to say we're just taking over the land so you don't need a zoning permit because it's a moot point because the city owns the land now. So when the Toms River Township Council held its monthly meeting a week ago, this ordinance was on the agenda. And the church only found out it was on the agenda the day before the meeting, like that night. So they put out a Facebook post. And check this out, because they're freaking out about this. But this is the Facebook post they posted last week, April 30th. Prepare to act. Do not despair or fear. They explained what's going on, but look at this near the bottom. Because this was just learned of late yesterday when the agenda was published, details to deal with it are just being worked out. We will have them to you later today. Plan to attend if you can. The council meeting is at this time, at this place. More details will be provided. One recommendation in opposing this action, do not make a case for the shelter. This is interesting to me. The church is telling its supporters, don't talk about why we need the shelter. Talk instead about why this is an improper use of eminent domain. Talk about why the city has no right to take over this land. Focus on that. Don't focus on the shelter. And we will deal with that separately. All right. And then some Jesus bullshit after that. But this is the church saying, holy crap, they're going to take us over. We need to do something about it. So they go to this meeting, right? And in theory, one of the other things they pointed out, I didn't show you this, but one of the things they pointed out is they said, we don't even own the building. The Episcopal Diocese in New Jersey owns this building, which means we have big guns who can actually fight this in court for us. So don't worry about that. We have lawyers who can help us out. And they could also make the argument, they said, that there are no other Episcopal churches nearby. So this decision by the city would deprive them of their ability to worship freely. And conservative judges would love that argument. Am I right? So they're saying, focus on the eminent domain thing and the religious freedom thing. Don't talk about the shelter. So word spread fast. That meeting happened a week ago. And it turns out there were a lot of supporters of this church at that meeting. But here's what's amazing. When they got to this item on the agenda, members of the city council, there are like 8 people on the city council, 8 or 9. A few of them began arguing on behalf of the church, and they started arguing about it in a way you will not believe. So, for example, one of the things that came up is when they brought up this ordinance, let's pass this thing to take over this land, there was a motion on the table. Let's table this motion. Let us not discuss it. Let's push it off to another time. And that got everyone into a big argument. Okay, I'm going to tell you what happens, then I'll play the video for you. One of the council members, his name is Thomas Niveson, he started yelling at one of his colleagues, for the first time this year, Craig, do the right thing and oppose this move to take over the land. After that, he yelled at another member of this council. Her name is Lynn O'Toole. And he said, you hate God. You hate Christ. Obviously, you hate humanity like our mayor. You hate homeless people. Come on, Lynn. And then the same dude went after another ordinance supporter, William Byrne. And he said, hey, Bill, what are you getting out of this, Bill? There was another member of the council who opposes this plan, who then led the whole council in the Lord's Prayer, which honestly, that's not helping. Don't do that. That's stupid. And then a third member of the council warned his colleagues, there is no way on God's green earth that anybody should vote for this ordinance. This is setting up our town for yet another lawsuit, one I don't think the mayor understands the scale of. This is bad in every direction. So there are some people fighting on behalf of the church. I'm going to play this clip for you. It is chaos. And because they're yelling so damn much, it is hard to understand them. That's why I tried to tell you what they're saying. But check this out. It is unbelievable.
I implore all the council people up here
No discussion.
to table
No
this.
discussion.
We're going to discuss it.
Right.
No discussion?
It's
I
a
think
first-
the town wants
it's a
some
first
discussion.
time. It's a first reading.
I know. I don't care if it's a first
Well,
reading.
we have rules. You need to obey
Yeah,
the
your rules.
No, the council.
Yeah, no, your rules.
No, the
Justin.
council rules. We have council rules.
Okay.
Mr. Pasquarello? Mr.
We
Pasquarello?
need to take Washington Street
you-
off of this. We need to take Washington Street off.
Council President Lamb.
No.
Come on, Craig. Do the right thing,
Hey,
Craig.
hey, you're getting out of order.
Craig, do the
Council
right
President
thing.
You're out of
For
order.
the first time this year. Do the right thing.
You're out of order.
Come on, Craig.
You're out of order.
Yeah, I know I'm out
You're out
of
of-
order.
Well, you should get back in order. Get back in order. You'll be removed.
Come on, Craig.
We can't.
For once, Craig. Vote the right way, Craig.
tell-
For once.
We've got to be able to,
Do the right thing, Craig.
Councilman Iverson, we have to be able to conduct the meeting. We have to be able to conduct the meeting, please.
Okay.
Why, Lynn?
Look,
Hold
that's
on.
not
There's
the
a
way-
motion on the
that's not
floor.
way we-
You hate
okay.
God? You hate
That's not-
Christ?
That's not the way we conduct business, please.
Obviously, you hate humanity like our mayor. You hate homeless people. Come on, Lynn. For once. Once. Not once since you've been up here. Have you done the right thing?
I am doing the right thing. So
Oh,
why
yeah,
don't you
right, you-
pipe down?
Oh, come on, Lynn.
Order, point of order.
How can you
You're
even
out of
look at-
order.
well-
You're out of order.
I know
You're out
I'm
of order. David, you're out of order. David, you're out of order. David, you're out of order.
This is a first reading.
Motion.
Councilman Iverson.
I vote no, and we're supposed to be here for the people, correct?
Councilman Quinlish.
There's no discussion. Mr.
Hey,
Henson,
Lynn,
next one.
for the people, right? Hey, Craig, for the people.
You're out of control.
Hey, Bill, what are you getting out of this, Bill?
You're out of control. Next
What
vote,
are they
please.
doing for you,
We have a
Bill?
motion, Councilman Quinlish.
He should be removed.
Councilman Quinlish.
Open.
There's no way on God's green earth
Your vote, Councilman, please.
that anybody should vote for this ordinance. This is setting up the town for yet another RLUIPA lawsuit, one that I don't think he understands the scale of. This is bad in every direction. My vote is unequivocally no.
Unbelievable. That is the wildest meeting ever. In case you're not familiar, he brought up RLUIPA. You've heard of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which is supposed to defend religious freedom, signed into law by Bill Clinton, but it's been weaponized by the religious right to basically say if there's a religious belief I hold, that should override whatever the law is. And religious right has weaponized that law. RLUIPA, which stands for a big long thing, it's a federal law that's an extension of RFRA that basically protects houses of worship from zoning discrimination. It's like religious freedom, but for churches. So that's what he's saying. We're going to be hit with one of those lawsuits if we move forward with this. This is bad in every direction. So there's 7 members on that board. You heard, I don't love their arguments. I don't think it's fair to accuse the other person of hating God. I don't think that lady hates God. I think she hates homeless people. I don't think it helps when one of the other supporters is like saying the Lord's Prayer. We don't need that. We don't need more Jesus at this meeting. But I think they are right ethically. So ultimately, again, they tried to make a motion to just not discuss this issue. That failed 4-3. So they were going to discuss the issue. And then they had to vote on whether they should move forward with this ordinance. And that passed 4-3. So they're going to discuss this again on May 28th. That's the date of their next meeting. At that point, public comment will be allowed, which means there's probably way more drama to come. So I've written a lot of stories about church-state separation. I've made a lot of videos about these types of issues. And sometimes when I see these battles taking place, it's like churches demanding public money for like private renovations and things like that. This is not one of those stories. Like the county is not providing this kind of shelter, and church officials are offering to do it and going through all the proper channels to get legal approval to do it. And the controversy has nothing to do with religion, but everything to do with what obligations a community has to people in their town with nowhere to live. And some residents would rather close their eyes and just not deal with it and hope the people in need just give up and go somewhere else. They don't want to help them in any meaningful way. So kudos to the church for actually wanting to help those people. Again, I don't think anyone on this council is making this vote out of religious animosity. I don't think they hate the church. I don't think they have any personal beef with the people of this church. I think they just don't want to see homeless people in their community, and they think this park would drive out homeless people and move them to some other community that may not have their resources. And if a church is going to help the people they don't like, these council members, the majority, are going to do whatever it takes to stop the church, even if it means taking the land they are sitting on. So I think that is deeply unethical. I think it may be illegal, but this is the controversy that is brewing as we speak. We'll find out at the end of the month what they're going to do moving forward, but I wanted to show you that clip. Let me see if there's any other questions before I finish up with this story. I'm doing my best to get rid of the trolls while I can, but there's a lot of them all using the same damn name. Sorry. All right, I'm going to move to a different story. Got a couple more for you. All right, let me jump to this. So far this legislative season, we have seen Montana try and fail to pass a resolution declaring that Christ is king. And North Dakota has tried and failed to pass a resolution acknowledging the kingship of Jesus Christ. And the Oklahoma House, I said in a video recently, has passed a resolution that says Christ is king, but their Senate hasn't dealt with it yet. I think all of this made Texas Republicans very jealous because they have now scheduled a hearing for a resolution that is so blatantly pro-Christian, it has no place in a secular democracy. Let me show you what this resolution is here, because it's just wild. Concurrent resolution number 59. Let's read through this, shall we? Whereas God keeps his promises. Like, how does this help anybody? What are we doing? Whereas God keeps his promises, and the Lord your God, yours, is God, and is faithful to keep his promises for all time to come. This is like drunk religious people talking here. And whereas the promises of God are stated thusly in the Gospel of John, whereas God has given to us his great and precious promises of love, hope, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, wisdom, and strength to sustain us through the life he has given us. Oh my God. Whereas God gives power to the weak and to those who have no might, he increases strength. And whereas, yada, 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 who cares, who cares, who cares? Whereas the promise of God is his word, which is revelation from him. I don't know why the government's doing any of this. I would be bored if a church was doing this, but why is the government doing this? But at the end of all this, look at this. Whereas the Declaration of Independence clearly reveals the fact that America was founded upon biblical principles. No, it wasn't. And Christian values. No, it wasn't. The Bible had great influence on the founding of our great nation. No, it did not. And then some Bible verses and all that. What is the whole point of this? Resolved that the 89th legislature of the state of Texas hereby designate April as Promise Month. And we're going to keep this in effect until the 10th anniversary of the date of this resolution is finally passed by the legislature. Let me rephrase that for you. They are going to say April is Promise Month on behalf of the promises God made to us in the Bible, and it's going to stay that way for the next 10 years. Christians just took over every April in the state of Texas for the next decade. That's what this resolution does. And in order to do that, they push Christian nationalist falsehoods promoted by like pseudo-historian David Barton, and they quote the Bible as if anyone cares about that. And they're saying that God promises us all these amazing things that, by the way, you don't find a lot of in Texas. Like you say, God gave us eternal life. Guess what? Texas loves the death penalty. God gave us love and peace and wisdom, but Texas is known for cruelty and guns and awful public education. Like just this week, they signed a law giving $1 billion toward vouchers for private and religious schools. Like that, they just decimated public education in the state of Texas. They say God gives power to the weak, but in Texas, healthcare access and economic security is hard to come by. They said God will heal our land. Well, guess what? Texas gets a lot of natural disasters and water shortages, and its politicians deny climate change while jetting off to Cancun. Like, and again, that revisionist history claiming the fact that our nation was founded upon biblical principles, that is just BS anyway. You know who's sponsoring this bill? It's a woman named Carrie Isaac. And this is Carrie Isaac, in case you had any doubt. She loves Jesus, in case you couldn't tell by the, I assume that's a semi-automatic rifle right there. But here's the thing. It's not just a crazy-ass Republican doing this. 47 other representatives of the Texas House sponsored this bill, including 11 Democrats. What the hell are they doing? So this had a first hearing in the House on May 1st, and now it is currently pending in the committee. It doesn't mean it's dead, though. But this is what they are trying to do in the Texas House. Look at this. These are the people who sponsored this bill. And you could see they have their political affiliation right next to them. Look at all the D's. Like literally and metaphorically. What are these people doing? I know there are conservative Democrats in Texas, but what the hell? You do not support a resolution like this that gives proverbial ammo to the Christian right. But that is what these people are doing in Texas. The Freedom from Religion Foundation has put out a statement denouncing this, not surprisingly. But note what one of the things they point out here I want to show you. Texas legislators are determined to implement their Christian nationalist agenda, even if a little bit at a time. And I forgot about this. I had to read this to be reminded of it. In 2023, Texas lawmakers passed a resolution declaring the last week of April to be Christian Heritage Week until 2033. And apparently having the last week of April is not good enough. They want the whole damn month. So if I have this right, they have all of April. They have all of December. That's Christian now. And I think May is the National Day of Prayer. So they got part of May as well. They're slowly just trying to take over the entire calendar. And they'll find any justification to do so. And they say at the end of this is not only out of touch with the secular founding principles of the United States, but also at odds with the pluralistic views of their fellow Texans. I also appreciate this at the bottom here. These government endorsements of Christianity serve a broader purpose, said Annie Laurie Gaylor. They normalize the false narrative perpetuated by extremists that Texas is a Christian state. This is then used to justify passing actual laws rooted in Christian nationalism that take away rights, violate religious freedoms, and cause real harms to those who don't conform to certain religious beliefs. That's what this is all about. Yes, it's a symbolic resolution. No, it's not going to change your life. But this is the thing. These types of resolutions lay the groundwork so that when they want to ban abortion, they can cite the Bible and then say, this is what God wanted, and this is a part of our nation's history, so we got to listen to the founders. Or if they already did that, they could say we got to overturn marriage equality in the state of Texas as soon as the Supreme Court allows us to do that, because we got to go back to the Bible because it's part of our history. Just look at this resolution we passed. That's why you don't let this shit slide, and why you don't let it happen, and why it's embarrassing that anyone in Texas, any Democrats in Texas are doing this. Like, these people don't care about what God promised, by the way, because they never do anything that follows the Jesus who delivered the Sermon on the Mount, right? They might as well pass a resolution that says, screw the New Testament. We're all Old Testament people here, because that's the only part they care about. And I say care about because they sure as hell haven't read the book. But that is what they are up to in Texas. It is dumb, but what else is new? What else are we doing here? Just checking comments really quickly before I move on. Dude, we got a lot of trolls here today. I hope these people are disappearing. Okay, I'm going to move on to a different story. Give me 1 second to clear up tabs and make my computer happy. Oh, all right. This is a very interesting, scary story coming out of Oklahoma. Public school students in Oklahoma starting next year, they are going to be taught that the 2020 election had discrepancies. It did not. They're going to learn that COVID originated in a Chinese lab. There is no conclusive proof of that. And you know what they're not going to learn about? George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, anything like that. And this is part of an ongoing attempt to brainwash children by Christian nationalists in the state. And so let me go back a little bit. Back in December, I made a video about this. Their state superintendent of public instruction, Ryan Walters, you know him, he issued a press release saying, we have new social studies standards for the state of Oklahoma. And look at what he said. The new standards are among the strongest in the country. They were not. But he says they are pro-America, pro-American exceptionalism, because we're not special. And they strengthen civics and constitutional studies across every grade. They include Superintendent Walters' Bible curriculum recommendations and mention the Bible and its historical impact over 40 times. He was super excited about how students would now use the Bible basically as a textbook. And he said in a statement, Oklahoma is putting the Bible and the historical impact of Christianity back in school. And he doesn't mean the Crusades. But this is his goal. He wants to inject the Bible into public schools. Remember, Ryan Walters is the guy that wanted to spend millions of dollars to buy Trump Bibles to put in every classroom to make this a reality. And then he couldn't get the money he wanted. So then he bought like 500 Bibles to use in AP government class, which is the one class where you don't need outside textbooks because all the teachers already have the curriculum. But this is what Ryan Walters has been doing to try to get the Bible into public schools. And if you look at what they actually tried to pass in Oklahoma, like, let me give you an example of what he was trying to do. Because in those standards, one of the things he said, for example, first graders would be taught the purpose and meaning of the Pledge of Allegiance and the significance of the phrase "under God." First graders would also have to explain the meaning of "In God We Trust" and the importance of religion to the American people. That's a thing they would just have to do now. What else? Second graders would be taught stories from Christianity that influenced the American colonists and founders and culture, including the teachings of Jesus, which we're just treating as fact now, all of it. Like, it's all stuff David Barton thinks about in his fever dreams. He also said we're going to teach you teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, and then in parentheses, the golden rule. Like, I assure you, the golden rule is not a Jesus original, okay? What else? In 8th grade, students would have to evaluate the role of Judeo-Christian ideals in supporting colonial demands for independence, as exemplified by the Bible being a frequently cited authority by America's founders. It was not a frequently cited authority. Okay, so for high school students, it got even worse. Like, for example, when you're studying slavery, the only time you saw Christianity and slavery together is when they talked about Christians who called for abolition. And there's just no mention of the fact that the Bible was often used to justify slavery. What about US government? Students would have to describe how the Constitution was influenced by religion, morality, and the Bible. What about world history? Students will have to describe how Christianity worked in ancient Rome, including the meanings and effects of Jesus of Nazareth's words as recorded by Matthew, which suggests that the Gospel of Matthew is like a first-person historical document, which is insane. All right. Here's another one that was very, very interesting. I'm going to show this one to you. This is in an elective class on 20th century totalitarianism. So it says students have to compare Judeo-Christian and Western political theory to communism. And specifically, they have to describe the Christian idea of the equality of souls, the Christian ideal of charity, and the renunciation of worldly wealth. Apparently, treating people as equal is a Christian thing, and charity is a Christian thing. And you know what Christians really hate? Wealth. And that's why they did not support Donald Trump. What? Like, it doesn't make any sense that they would be doing this. It just boggles the mind. But this is the sort of stuff they were pushing. My favorite version of this, though, that's not even religious, is the standards want students to summarize the political impact of Bill Clinton's impeachment, which is fair, but they make no mention of Donald Trump's 2 impeachments. So who made these policies? These right-wing Christian, who made them? Well, the people on the committee included a founder of PragerU, the right-wing misinformation YouTube channel, people from right-wing think tanks. Only 3 of the 10-person committee ever lived in Oklahoma, and there were no public school teachers or administrators who crafted those standards. Okay, so here's the thing. I've made a video about all of that. In February of this year, the Board of Education in Oklahoma had to approve those standards. They had to vote on it. But they were thinking maybe we should delay the vote because the governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, just appointed 3 brand new members to the Board of Education. Here's the thing. Kevin Stitt does not like Ryan Walters, even though they are both MAGA assholes. Kevin Stitt doesn't like Ryan Walters. So he appointed 3 people he kind of hoped would curb Ryan Walters. So they had to vote on these standards, but they didn't want to because they're new people. So what happened at that meeting? Well, here's an article from the Oklahoman back in February. Guess what happened? On Thursday, questions about the standards centered around whether the motion for their approval could be tabled for next month's meeting or a potential special meeting so that new board members could have more time to review them. One of the members asked Ryan Walters during the meeting whether it was possible to push the consideration to a special meeting. What did Ryan Walters say? He said he would prefer their approval to happen now, given what he said was an upcoming deadline to move it to the legislature. Ryan Walters knew they were trying to delay the approving his standards, and he's like, nope, we got to get it to the legislature. You got to approve it right now because we're on a time limit. We're in a time crunch. We got to get this so they approve it because otherwise we won't be able to use it in the fall. So he got these Board of Education members to approve the thing he was trying to get them to sign, right? But here's the thing we are now learning about his ploy. Why was he in such a rush to get it? Because guess what? It turns out the legislature, which does need to sign off on these, they did not need those standards for another month. So why was Ryan Walters in such a rush to do it? Well, this is from Judd Legum, who writes at Popular Information. This is how he summarizes it. Walters did not send the new standards with, let me back up for a second. Here we go. Many members have since said that Walters used deceptive tactics to pass new last-minute changes. Let me talk about this. It turns out the standards that Ryan Walters wanted these people to approve were not the ones I was just talking about. Between December and February, he personally went through and changed a bunch of stuff, and no one knew he did it. So when he was trying to get this new board to approve his standards, they were not the ones that I just told you about, the ones that have been dissected online for a while now. They were brand new ones that included shit no one had ever seen. And back to what Judd wrote. Walters did not send the new standards with his additions to the members of the board until 4 p.m. the day before their 9:30 a.m. meeting. This did not give members enough time to read the new standards, which are around 400 pages long. Some of the members said later they did not even realize that the new standards were different from the earlier version they had previously reviewed. That's why Ryan Walters was in such a rush to get them to sign it, because he changed stuff and he didn't tell anyone about it, and he wanted them to approve it before they figured it out. So there is a media outlet called NONDOC, N-O-N-D-O-C. They first reported that, wait a minute, the new standards that just got approved are very different from the ones Ryan Walters proposed back in December. So here's what they mean by that. Here's what the original standards said. Check this out. Analyze the significant events during the first Donald Trump administration. That's fair. Identify major policy issues, tax cuts, immigration, border security, and the expanding influence of social media. I get that. If you're teaching, high schoolers about what just happened, this is a pretty straightforward way. Yes, those are big topics. They should have a grasp of what the hell we're talking about. But look at the rest of this. Describe developments and changes in foreign policy. Yeah. Explain the responses and the impact of the death of George Floyd, including Black Lives Matter. Yeah, that's important. Evaluate the federal and private response to COVID and its lasting impact on health. Yes, very important. And examine issues related to the election of 2020 and its outcome, which is important because that last point implies teach kids about January 6th. That's a response to the 2020 election. So as a teacher, yes, if you're teaching US history and you're getting into modern history and you're trying to teach kids about the first Donald Trump presidency, those are big things you will want kids to know about. That was in the original version we saw in December. What did Ryan Walters do with that section now? Here's the new version of it. I'll zoom in. Explain the effects of the Trump tax cuts, child tax credit, border enforcement, including the Remain in Mexico policy, blah, 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 and inflation rates prior to COVID. Because who cares what happened after COVID, even though the Trump economy sucked? Look at letter C. Identify the source of the COVID-19 pandemic from a Chinese lab. What? Is that just a fact now? No, it's not, unless you live in right-wing crazy circles. Look at D, though. This is the one that got all the attention. Identify discrepancies in the 2020 election results by taking a look at graphs and other information, including The sudden halting of ballot counting in select cities and key battleground states. There was no sudden halting of it. The security risks of mail-in balloting. There are none. Sudden batch dumps. That's like a Dinesh D'Souza lie. An unforeseen record number of voters. Yeah, a lot of people voted. And the unprecedented contradiction of bellwether county trends. Like, holy shit. Instead of just saying, let's talk about the 2020 elections, they're saying specifically, the Ryan Walters version of this is, no. We got to teach kids about right-wing conspiracy theories. By the way, do you notice that George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, it's no longer in this list because he just crossed that one out entirely. So this is what Ryan Walters is doing with the standards now. He's just using them to promote right-wing conspiracies. Here's another example of what he did. This is in the original version back in December. Describe the challenges and accomplishments of the Biden administration. Yes, kids should know about what happened during the Biden administration. So what did they say? Talk about assess economic recovery after COVID. That seems fair. Describe bipartisan efforts about infrastructure. Yeah, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It was a big deal. Kids should know about that. Describe the U.S.-Mexico border crisis. Yes, there's a lot of news about that. And then finally, describe his foreign policies, specifically the withdrawal from Afghanistan, response to Russia invading Ukraine, and the Gaza-Israel conflict. Yeah, those are important things to discuss if you're discussing Biden. What is the Ryan Walters version of this section? This is what he says. Describe the challenges and accomplishments of the Biden administration. Oh, by the way, he just crossed out all the accomplishment stuff. There's nothing about the bipartisan infrastructure bill. There's nothing about the economic recovery after COVID. It just says examine the border crisis and then describe the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which, Republicans like because they use it to attack Biden. So he's basically brainwashing kids by using a revisionist history that just ignores anything good Democrats did. Here's one more. Remember I told you there was an elective class on totalitarianism that said describe the Christian idea of equality of souls and charity and the renunciation of wealth. He crossed that entire section out. They're just not teaching that one anymore. So again, what's the point of all this? None of these changes were made public prior to them being voted on. And Ryan Walters didn't mention them when he was telling this board, go vote on the standards now. There's another problem with this. Now that people know this is what's going on and this is what he did, there's another problem, which is that it's going to become really hard to find textbooks that spread right-wing misinformation. And this is what one of the Democrats in the legislature pointed out. Standards which deviate too far from established facts can make it hard for textbook companies to write textbooks for the state. When you start deviating from what is the norm and the truth and start coming up with your own truths and throwing in the Bible and election denying and all that, there's going to come a point where Oklahoma won't have a textbook publisher willing to align to our standards and sell a book in Oklahoma because it's very expensive. Because this makes sense, right? You would have to write a textbook that doesn't cover the stuff every other state is trying to teach kids. You have to write a textbook that specifically promotes misinformation. And not only that, if you're the textbook company that is pushing the misinformation, why would other states that give you more business want to work with you? You're the shitty company that publishes misinformation. So it's like bad business to be the textbook company that promotes these lies, right? So it's a fair point. You're not going to find textbooks that do all this, which makes it harder to teach any of this stuff. So what can Oklahoma do about this? Well, the whole reason Ryan Walters said he wanted to rush this vote is because the legislature has to do something about it. What are their options? They could approve the standards. They could disapprove the standards in whole or in part. They could edit and amend some of the things that were written in there, right? But if they don't do anything, then what Ryan Walters gave them just moves forward. So there was a resolution this week to block this. Late last week, there was a resolution to block the standards from being approved. A Republican actually proposed a resolution to no, let's say no to these standards, take it back to the drawing board and make them do it again. Guess what happened to that? Here's the first line from the news article. Republicans who objected to process the standards, they filed a resolution last week to block it, but that resolution didn't make the floor agenda on Tuesday. Republicans could have voted to say no to these standards, and there was a resolution to say, let's not approve them. And they said, we're going to ignore that resolution, which means the standards just skate through because the legislature did not act on them. And what that means is right now, those are the new social studies standards in Oklahoma. And that means starting this fall, kids will be taught misinformation in Oklahoma. Why? Because Ryan Walters cares more about appeasing Donald Trump than preparing students for the future. And honestly, this is going to hurt the students, because if you're a college admissions counselor and you have an application from a high schooler in Oklahoma in the years moving forward, you're going to have to think twice about that child, because the default thinking is going to be, sorry, this kid doesn't know enough U.S. history to succeed at the college level. We cannot admit this kid into our program. That's what this does. It sets kids up for failure because Ryan Walters and Republicans in Oklahoma do not care about education in their state. It's why they're ranked 49th in the country. So these social studies standards, they are now riddled with right-wing conspiracies. They are really, as we already knew, another way to just inject Christianity where it doesn't belong. And Ryan Walters can pretend this is not about inflicting his religion and political views on kids, but everything he says and does is in that direction. He doesn't say he wants to convert kids. He instead just says Christianity is American history, and that gives him a secular rationale for his religious goals. He doesn't have to say he's brainwashing kids. He can just say he's trying to educate them, but we all know what he's actually doing. You know, these people always complain that the left is brainwashing kids and they don't allow kids to think for themselves. And we see what they are doing when they have power. And it's literally lying to children to try to spread right-wing misinformation. Like, it's a lot easier to get kids to believe lies when you refuse to ever tell them the truth. And what was Ryan Walters' reaction after the legislature chose not to do anything about his standards? This is what he posted online. Today is a major victory for Oklahoma families and for the truth. No, that's literally a lie. After months of Democrats and the teachers' unions lying and attacking the most unapologetically conservative pro-America social studies standards in the nation are moving forward. So Democrats and teachers' unions were like, this is a politically biased, religiously biased set of standards. And he's like, no, it's not. You're lying. And now he's like, you guys, I passed the most conservative agenda ever. For nearly a year, we engaged in a thoughtful, no, transparent, definitely no, process to deliver standards that teach students factual history, no and no, including the realities of the 2020 election, because Ryan Walters is a denier, the COVID-19 pandemic, which he's also a denier of, and the threat posed by China. Okay. These reforms will reset our classrooms back to educating our children without liberal indoctrination. Because again, they equate liberal indoctrination, that's reality, but they call it liberal indoctrination. And so he has to swing the pendulum from the center to his side. And it's right-wing indoctrination and lies, which he now pretends is neutrality. So, and look, he just admits it right here. As part of these standards, the Bible will now be recognized as a foundational text. Can't understand our nation's history without the Bible. His book of mythology is now treated like a history textbook. Again, seriously, if you have the chance to get your kids out of an Oklahoma school, you are better off, because this is what their public schools are doing, and Republicans in the state don't have the courage to push back against it. Unbelievable, unbelievably stupid. For what it's worth, and I don't know how serious this is, it may be premature. And the only reason I say that is because Americans United for Separation of Church and State and a group called the Appleseed Center for Law and Justice, they have issued a statement condemning the new standards, and they say they plan to take action. I'm quoting here. We are preparing to take the steps necessary to protect the religious freedom of all Oklahoma public school students and prevent these standards from undermining public education in Oklahoma. They're preparing to take the steps necessary. What does that mean? Are they going to file a lawsuit over this? I hope so. They haven't done it yet, but that to me is reading between the lines. That's where they're going with this. I hope they do it because they got to act fast before these standards actually get implemented when the school year starts up again next fall. All right. I am doing this. Some a listener is saying an injunction has been filed. I don't know if that's true. I haven't seen it for myself. I hope you are right about that. But again, this is what's going to have to happen. You have to get the courts to put a stop to this because this is not history. Okay. I'm going to jump to one last story here. And this is one I have not posted about yet. And I think for some of you, this may be new information. So I hope it is. I think I'm going to post about this tomorrow. Give me a second to pull this up. I spent most of today just trying to wrap my head around how insane this story is. All right, let me show you a picture of this guy. This guy you're seeing here, this is Michael Brown, Dr. Michael Brown. He hosts a YouTube show called In the Line of Fire. That's the name of his ministry. And he's been around for a while now. I mean, he's been doing this for decades. He's an apologist. He's an evangelist. He promotes Messianic Judaism, like he was raised Jewish, but he's totally a Christian. He spouts anti-LGBTQ talking points. He runs a ministry called the Fire School of Ministry. Among other things, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, he has suggested, do you all remember Joe Paterno, that whole scandal? It was more than a decade ago now. But there was a guy, a Penn State assistant football coach named Jerry Sandusky, who did horrible things to children. Well, Michael Brown, when he was talking about that story, he suggested that Sandusky sexually abused children because he was gay. And this is what Brown actually said. Could it be that the Penn State sex abuse scandal involving a man allegedly abusing boys, meaning that his acts were homosexual in nature, suggesting Sandusky did it because he's gay and not because he's a predator like that? No, what the hell are you doing? But that is who Michael Brown is. This is a guy who is as right-wing as anyone you will see on Fox or Newsmax, except when he presents, he offers up this demeanor of, you guys, I'm just speaking common sense here. You'll never hear him yell on his show. He's just listening to all sides. But I'm the voice of reason, and I'm just here to tell you that these right-wing conspiracy theories are true. That's his demeanor on his show. So he's been doing this for a really long time. He puts himself out there as like a reasonable bigot. But back in December, all of this kind of came crashing down because this is the headline on one news site, the Royce Report, a Christian news site. But Michael Brown faces sexual misconduct allegations. Ministry hires third-party investigator. And this is a wild story, but basically a 21-year-old, she worked for Michael Brown decades ago in his ministry. And we'll call her Erin for now. Erin told the Royce Report she left the ministry because she felt trapped when Revival leader and Fire School of Ministry founder Michael Brown, a man she called Dad, would frequently cross physical boundaries. He would hold her hand, kiss her on the lips, slap her bottom, she said. He was supposed to be a spiritual father, Erin said. He was supposed to look after me. So this woman said Michael Brown sexually harassed her all these years ago. That's why she left the ministry. And here's the thing. After these allegations came out, Michael Brown said he told his board members about the allegations before they were published. Basically, the reporter said, hey, Michael Brown, I'm going public with this story. What do you have to say about it? And he said, give me a second. And he ran to his board and said, you guys, there are these allegations out there about me. And he said, I want to tell you what happened. And also, by the way, there's another woman, and I had an emotional affair with that other woman. Sure, she was my best friend's wife, but whatever. It's all in the past, is what he said. He told them he made mistakes in the past, but they were behind him now. He said he had repented. And he also issued a statement Like, he did this before that article I just showed you came out. He issued a statement to the Roy's Report, and you could see what he says here. It's one of those standard, I got to do some PR before this comes out. In recent weeks, very serious accusations have come to me and my board concerning events from 23 years ago. Blah, blah, blah. We wholeheartedly support our board's immediate decision to launch a thorough third-party investigation. This goes on for a while. He says of that young woman, Erin, who was 21 at the time, Nancy, his wife, and I did have a relationship with the woman in question and considered her to be like a family member. But she was not a family member, and aspects of my interaction with her, although totally non-sexual in every way, reflected a definite lack of judgment on my part. So this goes on. He says, I learned I made her uncomfortable. Don't worry, I apologized to her. We talked things through, and I thought everything was fine. And we chatted every once in a while. I did not know it was such a bad thing at all this time, right? So he says in that letter, the fact is that my actions toward her were certainly foolish and irresponsible, but neither sexual nor amorous in any way. Okay? And then he says at the very end, if it is true that for let me show you this at the very end. If it is true that for 23 years she has carried this pain and I am responsible for it, I am beyond mortified and would plead forgiveness and the opportunity to bring healing and restoration. Her well-being remains our priority. So this is the statement he made, knowing this story was going to come out. Okay, so here's the thing. His board, and who's his board? It's buddies of his, right? Like, that's your board of a Christian ministry. Just like most churches, mega churches have like the pastor who's the front man of the band. And then you have the elders who are behind the scenes and who set the salary, and they're always like buddy with the pastor. And so this board hired an outside law firm, they said, to conduct an investigation into this matter. And they said, don't worry, whatever their report is, we're going to make it public for everyone to see. But the thing is, the company they actually hired, the dude they hired to do the investigation, turns out his whole shtick is, I routinely defend other sexual predators in court. And they were like, oh, these are bad optics. So they ended up saying no to that firm, and later on they hired a different firm called Firefly to investigate the matter. And at the time, this is in early December, Michael Brown tweeted this: because I can't make any comments on the current situation I'm dealing with until the investigation is completed, I'm going to deactivate my account until then. Which, by the way, you don't need to. You can just stop using it. But if you deactivate it, it means no one can reply to you and spread the story and tag you in it. May the Lord be glorified. Feel free to screenshot this post while it's up. Okay, thanks. I did. Okay, so that's what he posted back in December. And by and large, he has been out of the public eye since December. But guess what? It got worse from there. Because that woman in question, Erin, the 21-year-old at the time, she spoke with another person who was close to Michael Brown, and she's like, what the hell did that man just say in his private statement? He said he apologized to me and that we've been buddy-buddy ever since. That's not true. Let me show you. The guy's name is Ron Cantor. He used to work with Michael Brown, and here's what he says. Sarah Monk is her name. She's since made this public, so I'm not revealing anything I shouldn't. But he said Sarah Monk is Erin, and she's telling her story in her own voice. And this is what she says. I keep thinking about why Michael Brown won't just admit to what he has done or publicly repent and bring healing to so many who have been hurt by his actions and words. Why is he hiding? Why such a vague statement? Why did he lie in this statement? I know they are lies because I'm Erin. This goes on for a while, but she says, yes, Dr. Michael L. Brown put his hand on my butt. The one who condemned so many for a lustful eye, who screamed from the pulpit, repent of your sinful ways, the one who taught us to live holier than the day before, the one who preached revolution, the one who said being alone with the opposite sex was a sin and would get you kicked out of school. Yeah, that Michael Brown was alone in his office with someone from the opposite sex touching my butt as I would exit his office. This didn't happen just once, never happened in front of his wife, but it did happen privately. Then the kiss, not just one kiss or two, but many. Once again, he had someone of the opposite sex in his office alone. As I told him goodbye, he sat in his chair and leaned up for a kiss on the lips, not the head, as he has told others. And yeah, I gave him one. I felt something was off. Why didn't I stop it? I don't know. I will just say in her defense, if you're 21 and your boss is the guy doing that, there's a power dynamic at issue here. So it's unfair to blame her for any of that. But then finally, so Nance, he said, I apologize to her from the heart. It never happened, said Aaron. The idea that he apologized to me in this meeting is a complete fabrication. The only meeting we had was when I found the confession he wrote about another woman. Oh, so, just juicy gossip, good stuff here. But you get the point here. Michael Brown says, look, this thing did happen. It happened a long time ago. It wasn't that big of a deal. But if I caused her any pain, I'm sorry. I apologize to her. It's not a big deal now. And the woman says, wait a minute. All of that is a lie. It is way worse than what you are confessing to. And you did not apologize to me. What the hell are you talking about? So that's not great for him. And then we learn details about his emotional relationship with another woman who turned out to be his friend's wife. That came out. That was also disturbing. He then, even though he's on a sabbatical from social media, he released another video, which he has since deleted, where he said he tried confessing all of this to his church earlier, but everyone involved told him not to. I'm sure they did. Anyway, huge mess. So cut to a couple of weeks ago, late April. Guess what? Firefly is done doing its investigation into the matter, and they released their report. Here it is for you right here. This was the report that they put out. Firefly, Independent Sexual Abuse Investigations. And this is about Michael Brown. Look at the date on this thing, April 12th, 2025. So they just released this. This is 47 pages long. And basically, let me jump to the summary right here. Here we go. After reviewing evidence, this is at the very top. After reviewing evidence, conducting interviews, and analyzing the situation, the investigation concluded that Michael Brown's actions toward the two females were inappropriate and unacceptable for his leadership position within the ministry. Such conduct violated the ethical standards expected of someone in his role and undermined the trust and integrity essential to leadership within the church community. The findings highlighted the seriousness of the actions and emphasized the necessity of accountability to preserve the values and reputations of the ministry. That seems pretty damning. I mean, the thing that comes to mind in all this, and it's not an analogous situation, but like you remember Jerry Falwell Jr. and his wife and the pool boy who they had fun with, and then sometimes his wife would be like predatory toward boys on campus that were friends with their kids. Like they had sex with a ton of people. And nothing about it was illegal per se. If Jerry Falwell was just a dude, no one would care. But the thing was the hypocrisy. He's running Liberty University at the time, where you're not like even allowed to hug someone of the opposite sex for more than a few seconds. And here are him and his wife like swinging and inviting strangers to their bedroom. Like, again, I don't personally care about his sex life, but Jerry Falwell made it his business to care about everybody else's sex life. So it was the hypocrisy of it all in that case. And in some cases, his wife went even beyond that. In Michael Brown's case, I don't think anything he did is illegal per se. And again, I do not care about this man's personal life, but he's running a ministry that preaches purity culture. And he promotes like the Mike Pence rule and the Billy Graham rule, which says you can't be alone with someone of the opposite sex because lust will take over, maybe. And here he is doing all those things that would get his own students kicked out of his school. So it's the hypocrisy of it all that is so disturbing. But I want to show you one other thing that is in this report, which is near the end. Check this out right over here. While it is impossible to definitively prove deviant intent behind these actions, like we don't know if he was trying to be weird about it or he just didn't know any better, as the only person who sent and or received sexually related communication with Brown is deceased, because that the woman he was having an emotional affair with, she's dead now. The patterns of his actions suggest that Brown knowingly contributed to the situation and created an environment where Sarah, that young woman from the past, she felt uncomfortable. And even if years later acknowledges that the relationship was inappropriate, although the lack of direct proof of intent leaves room for speculation, the numerous interviews and in many cases corroborating documentation point to a deliberate involvement of sexual misconduct within the ministry, which could also be viewed as sexual harassment and or a hostile work environment, especially given the power dynamics, is what they're getting at. So, okay, they're saying, look, even if we give you the benefit of the doubt, what you did was inappropriate, doesn't belong in the ministry, it was bad, and that's the best case scenario here. So, okay, that is pretty damning. And they have 47 pages of highlighting interviews that they did and emails that were sent and proof from a lot of people that say, no, I heard about this in real time and it was disturbing and we saw it happen and it was weird and it was inappropriate and all of that. So what do you think happens? This third-party investigative team, they put together this report. They're going to give it to the elders of Michael Brown's ministry. Normally, you would say, okay, the elders got the report. They're going to publish it, as embarrassing as it may be, and they're going to say, sorry, Michael Brown, we did the investigation. It said this. We're going to have to kick you out of here, and we as a ministry will try to do better. That is what they did, right? Of course not. Of course not. Here's what actually happened. In response to that report last week, the elders released their own report. And basically, this is very long. I mean, it's 17 pages, I think, but it's still very long. But by and large, what do they say? Oh my God, it's insane. Let me make sure I can find this for you here. I'm going to jump back to me for a second. But one of the things they pointed out is I'm sorry. Sorry about that. What they said is we're ignoring what Firefly told us. That report, that 47-page report we just got handed, we're rejecting it. Why are we rejecting it? Because, for example, they say the definition of sexual abuse was stretched way too broadly. You see, apparently it's only called sexual abuse if it comes from the sexual abuse region of France. Otherwise, it's just misconduct. They literally argue that Firefly investigators overreached in their investigation. Here we go. Let me show you this summary from the Christian Post. The Elder Accountability Team argued in their review that the Firefly investigators overreached in their investigation of Brown's actions when they expanded their definition of sexual abuse beyond the historically narrow understanding of those terms to classify his conduct as sexually abusive misconduct. We believe a more accurate and historically consistent characterization of what he did is a moral indiscretions in the case of the wife and leadership misconduct in the case of the young woman, Sarah. So you guys, he didn't commit sexual misconduct. It was some moral indiscretions and some leadership misconduct, but it wasn't sexual misconduct or sexual abuse. Calm the hell down. That's just one of the ways they are rejecting what Firefly said. What else did they say? They said the report said Michael Brown groomed his former secretary, that young woman. They said that's unfair because it's just a grievous lack of judgment and a violation of the conduct established by his standards for the ministry. They also said the report did not include statements from Michael Brown or his wife, but you did publish statements from a lot of people who spoke out against what he did, so therefore you are biased, so we don't have to listen to what you have to say. Notice they did not say that those other statements were lies. Apparently, for whatever reason, the Firefly investigation didn't include challenges, like with Michael Brown saying, yeah, I didn't do any of that stuff. It's not their job to be stenographers for him. They did their investigation. They're like, we don't care what your excuse is. Here is what happened. And the ministry's like, well, you didn't include anything he said. Doesn't matter what he said. That's not what the evidence is. Then another reason this ministry said they're rejecting the findings is that apparently in the book of Matthew, chapter 18, there are rules to follow if you are accused of wrongdoing, and those rules were not followed. Why? Because Matthew 18 says if you are accused of something, you have to go to the person who is accusing you yourself and try to work it all out. And Sarah, the girl who was 21 at the time, the young woman, when she wanted to accuse Michael Brown of doing something inappropriate, she did not go to him first to try to resolve it privately. Again, power dynamic. She's young. He's much, much older. Why would she be expected to do that? How can you put this on her as if she didn't do something right? And the ministry says, because they did not follow Matthew 18, these allegations were relitigated with accusations, judgment, and sentencing by a jury on social media. Like, what the hell? And then this is their conclusion. Let me pull this up for you right here. It was a 27-page report by the ministry. Here's what they say at the end. Conclusion. It appears clear to the elder accountability team that throughout this process, dating back 23 years, Dr. Brown has been repeatedly questioned about these two situations and has answered the interrogators consistently with honesty and remorse. That is not what everyone else says. He was not honest. He did not answer every question. The elder accountability team believes it is time to finally put this matter to rest. This matter they just learned about like a few months ago, and allow these transgressions to remain where they should be, nailed to the cross of Christ. Holy shit. Cast as far as the east is from the west and no longer used against him, which is a very biblical way of saying everyone else needs to shut up about this. It happened a long time ago. Nothing matters anymore. Calm the hell down. Also, as this commenter points out, 23 years is a long time ago, but something that happened 2,000 years ago is solid as a rock. Bingo. Statute of limitations in our minds has expired. Therefore, no one can bring these charges against him. Unbelievable. So apparently conservative morality, if I have this right, says it's perfectly fine to emotionally and physically abuse other people as long as you do it a long time ago, and then you're cool. Under that logic, there's nothing that can't be forgiven with the passage of time, even if the scars of what he did to people are still being felt by his victims long afterwards. Like, this is very self-serving if you're Michael Brown, and this does nothing for you if you are one of his victims. So what did Sarah, who went by Aaron in the initial thing, what did she say about all of this? When the ministry said, oh, that's cute that Firefly said you did something wrong, and we hired them to do this report. Yeah, we're just going to toss out everything they just found, and welcome back, guy who makes us money. What did Sarah say about all of this at the end? The report drew criticism from other whistleblowers and a victim hoping for public affirmation of the investigation and stronger discipline for Brown. Monk told the Roy's report it was a gut punch. What hurt the most was seeing how they decided they didn't like the wording of the sexually abusive misconduct when it came to me. That's why victims don't come forward, because those are supposed to be helping and protecting and counseling. They just don't care. I mean, yeah, she's not wrong about that. I wouldn't want to come forward either if this is what I had to put up with. I mean, good for her for coming forward. So again, here's the bottom line. Michael Brown did not do anything criminal per se, but his actions did violate the very rules his school promoted and that he says is essential for living a moral life, right? It is deeply ironic that Michael Brown believes that gay people in monogamous relationships contribute to moral confusion, which is something he has said, but a straight man manipulating women through a power imbalance like he did can run a ministry without a problem as long as all this shit happened a long time ago and he promises he'll do better. By the way, I was wondering, how come they didn't include his wife's statements in the Firefly report? Well, she released her statement to the ministry. And when you read it, you're like, oh, that's why they didn't include it. You are crazy. Like, she wrote this long, rambling thing. Look at this. I must state here categorically and in no uncertain terms, Mike is not and never has been a sexual predator, groomer, or deviant, nor has he ever exploited a single human being for his own personal gain or ego, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. That is not who he is and never who he was. This is fantasy. This is very Ginny Thomas vibes here. He has never attempted to overpower or manipulate any female or force himself on them for sexual or emotional or physical gratification, nor has he used them to stroke his ego or to get something from them. Never. Even though, by the way, all this stuff that he is being accused of happened when she was not around. This goes on for a long while, by the way, this statement. She said, what else did she say near the end? She says, although Mike's interaction with Sarah was certainly foolish and irresponsible, and I want her to stop there and just describe what exactly she thinks he did. That was foolish and not bad. His intentions were completely innocent. You guys, when he slapped her on the butt without her consent, it was innocent. And when he kissed her on the lips repeatedly, it was innocent, with absolutely no malintent. He viewed her as a father to a daughter. That is also not helping right now. Unfortunately, he has been made to look like a diabolical deviant and predator, and nothing could be further from the truth. That is not Mike Brown. That is not who he was and not who he is. And although he is eager to admit his fault and take responsibility for the things he did do and to ask for forgiveness without justification or even explanation, I cannot sit idly by while he takes the hit for things that never transpired and for the way his character has been portrayed. Because, you see, Michael Brown is really the true victim in all of this. And why is that woman lying about my husband? Like, you can tell why Firefly did not want to include this, I assume, in their statement. So this elder accountability team, they then said, we're going to let Michael Brown come back to doing all the shit he does because he's cool now. And this is what they said. Since Dr. Brown's sins were committed long ago, without any repeated behavioral patterns of like conduct, considering that these issues were believed to have been dealt with using biblical due process as they understood it in 2002, considering his recent confession and repentance of his sins, considering his willingness to step back from ministry until the completion of the Firefly investigation, which they do not care about, believing he is trustworthy, presuming the above recommendations will be followed, the Elder Accountability Team recommends that Dr. Brown be released to public ministry with the hope that a new dimension of humility and strength of character may be added to his already broad field of biblical knowledge, believing that the years ahead will be the most fruitful of all, marked by greater humility and Christ-likeness. Because if there's one thing we know about Jesus Christ, it's that he loved slapping people on the ass without their consent. So the Elder Accountability Team is like, yeah, man, you're good now. We threw away and burned the report. You go back to work because you're the whole ministry and we need you here. And so guess what happened? I'm making this on Thursday. On Wednesday of this week, for the first time in like 6 months, Michael Brown released a video talking about this issue. And let me play you the first clip here. This is short, but this is what he says.
I know that as I'm speaking to you, some you are thrilled to see me back online, and others, you'd rather never see my face again. So I want to make it clear, I'm not here to debate. I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to prove a point. I'm not here to chase down this rumor or refute this allegation. I'm not going to be putting up screenshots and video clips and getting to some kind of internet war.
Yeah, of course he doesn't want to talk about it. Of course he doesn't want to debate it because the debate makes his side look bad. So he doesn't want anything to do to rehash this. There's one other clip I wanted to play for you here, because how does he summarize the damning report from Firefly and the elders rejecting what it said? Here's how he summarizes all of how all of that went down.
First, the investigation, Then the results of that investigation were turned over to an independent team of elders. This was the process I was asked to submit to, and I said, yes, let's do it. The investigation was turned over to an independent team of elders. They looked at the results of the investigation, they evaluated me, and then they rendered their verdict. And on April 28th, they released me to resume ministry effective immediately. And that's why I'm here now speaking to you today.
So notice how he said that. He said there was an investigation, and then the elders looked at the investigation, and then they said I could come back. Like, he kind of skipped all the important stuff there. He acts like the elders' rejection of the investigation is just the final verdict, and that's all anyone should care about. Details, who wants to talk about the details? Like, if the investigation by Firefly said Brown was unfairly accused of everything, you know he would have mentioned that. Instead, he just glosses over the specifics while insisting, don't worry, the people who oversee me say I'm cool, so let's move on, everybody. Of course he says that. So you can guess what'll happen now. He will continue making videos as if none of this ever happened. He will go on moralizing as if he's the expert on it. His supporters will not give a damn, because since when do they give a damn about hypocrisy? Hypocrisy is never an issue for conservative zealots. It's why they will vote for a sexual predator while demonizing trans people and refugees and calling them threats to women. I will say, not everybody who has worked with Michael Brown agree with this. One of his longtime ministry partners, Ron Cantor, the guy who published Sarah's statement on Twitter, he released a 16-page document, like, responding to the elders rejecting that thing, explaining, like, here's why you shouldn't have rejected it. And he talks about, like, the sexual abuse definition. He's like, when you signed a contract with Firefly, they would have told you this is the standard we're using, and you would have agreed to it. And so the fact that they use this expanded definition, that shouldn't have come as a surprise to you. That is what they said they were going to do. That makes sense. He also says the elders promised they would hire a trauma-informed counselor to keep Dr. Brown accountable throughout the investigative process. But one was never assigned. It goes on like this for a while. And at the very end of this, look at what he says in his conclusion. I want to show you this. The elder accountability team believes it is time. Oh, this is what they said, right? I read you that. I'm sorry. There it is. Conclusion. Sadly, this report seems to have one goal: to get Mike back in the ministry. 5 people, none of whom are trained psychologists with experience in clergy sexual abuse, are telling 5 million people that this is over. Wow. And by the way, he's not the only one. There's another person who used to work with Michael Brown. His name is Robert Gladstone, and he posted on Facebook his own thoughts about all this. And I just want to zoom in here. While the accountability team's recommendations failed to account for something, it did emphasize the isolated nature of the abuses. But as I've stated before, they were not isolated to the past. Michael Brown makes it sound like all of this happened 20 years ago. No, it didn't. They continue with the victim's pain and the alleged ongoing lies. In other words, in my opinion, the accountability team rewrote history regarding the original problem, calling it something they prefer, and then isolating it to the past. And then they disregarded a very credible account of cover-up. So even people who have worked with Michael Brown are like, we are not buying what his team is putting out there. Robert Gladstone said the injustice continues because this report insults the survivors, further injures them, ignores many who testify of his cover-up and lies, completely misjudges the need for public exposure, and then commends a man back into ministry while giving those he mistreated further pain. And the thing about conservative groups is there's always a figurehead with way too much power. And then everybody else, no matter how much they warn others, are routinely ignored. So if Michael Brown's own ministry will not hold him accountable for what he did to violate their own standards, there is no hope for anyone there. It's frustrating. I think that's it. I think I'm done for tonight. I know this was a long one, and I think I'll stop there. I'm sorry if I missed your questions. Remember, as always, as I'm doing this, I hope Den is back next week, but you can always subscribe to my channel by going to friendlyatheist.com. I appreciate that. If you subscribe, you could do that right now. You can support me by going to patreon.com/Hemant. And otherwise, I should be here next week, probably on Thursday. And I hope to see you then. Thanks for sticking around for this. I'll see you later.